ready to go. Good evening. Welcome to the June 25th Select Board meeting. I'm John Martin, Francine Tishman, Chris Falls. Matt Rowland will join us a little later, and Maureen Groden is here with us. So if you could all stand up, and we're going to say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The meeting is being taped, but is not going out live because we're continuing to have some equipment difficulties. I understand that tomorrow we're going to have somebody here to change some more equipment. Do we think that's going to solve it, or?
We won't know until tomorrow.
So, is there anything beyond the equipment tomorrow that they could change, or?
We won't know until tomorrow.
Jen from ECOT is not committing, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. Okay, this is a joint meeting with the Public Safety Complex Committee. Do you have a quorum?
We don't.
No, Public Safety Complex
Okay.
Committee. There's no quorum, so you can't take any votes or anything?
Well, we're not going to take a vote.
No, that's fine, but just wanted to announce that you are here, so. Okay, we're going to move one of the items, two of the items actually, under new business, where it says Select Board to vote to sign conservation restriction for Glendale Road property and to sign baseline report for Glendale Road, because Robin Richards is here and she's a notary, so we don't want to keep her too long. So, Ed, do you want to go over those?
Sure, they are quite lengthy, but in summary, Kestrel has developed the conservation restriction and the baseline report for the Glendale Road property, which is one of the requirements for the land grant, which received $400,000. The conservation restriction gets signed by Kestrel and the Board of Selectmen and needs to be notarized. That's why Robin Richards is here tonight to notarize your signatures. The baseline report was signed last night by the Conservation Commission, and it needs the signature of the Municipal Chief Executive Officer, which would be the chair of the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board. In that case, so there are 2 copies of each of these 2 documents, and we had put them out on the Dropbox, and they are in your package for this evening.
Do you want to pass the originals down? We'll sign them. Sure. In front of Robin.
And this is the baseline report, which also includes the management plan, which needs the chair of the Select Board's signature.
Okay. Thank you. Randy, could you sign those?
Ed, can you explain the process from here on these? They go to the state?
Yes. Have the package just about complete. Kestrel does have to sign 1 page on, I think it's the conservation restriction, and I'll put that in the package, and we will overnight that to the state tomorrow.
Okay.
So everything is in place for the Glendale Road property. We have all the recordings from the Registry of Deeds, all the records of the payments that were made. The last 2 pieces that we were waiting for were really the finalized baseline report and the conservation restrictions. So Vicki filled out the paperwork on the billing form today with all the cost information. So it is basically, once we get those last signatures from Kestrel, it's ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
There's a second one of that. Oh, I signed it down here. That's okay. I put my,
Yeah, but they're looking for it up here, so you're going to look at that and say it wasn't signed by the select board.
here's these. Thanks for saying, Robin.
Ed, can I just clarify something that came up the last Select Board meeting? So, once all this gets submitted, the $400,000 from the state will be reimbursed to us, right? So we, last meeting, you all approved a short-term borrowing, a bridge of a year. When would we expect to get the $400,000?
I had asked what the hit Mark Walmsley from Kestrel had seen on that, and he says he's seen it be anywhere from a short time of 2 weeks up to about 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the year was just to not have, because of the borrowing terms, or what?
Our Unibank, who was our financial advisor, along with bond counsel, had looked at the interest rates on very short term and then turning them over versus what a year would be. And they actually deemed that we were better off doing basically the full year. And we'll start probably around the 9-month mark of actually going out to sell it permanently. And then it'll get rolled over. So it was actually a financial decision at that point.
Okay. And is there a payoff option without having to wait the whole year, or no?
There's no penalty, right?
No,
There's no penalty, okay, good.
no.
Okay, any more questions on
We're
that?
good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Robin.
Okay, we have a lot of appointments here, so I'm going to read them. Ronald Bednar is electrical inspector, alternate, term to expire 6/30/20. James Fisher, electrical inspector, term to expire 6/30/20. Jonathan Flagg, building commissioner, alternate, term to expire 6/30/20. Charlie Kanicki, emergency management director, term to expire 6/30/20. Ronald Lauren, building commissioner, alternate, term to expire 6/30/20. Anthony Logren, gas and plumbing inspector, alternate, term to expire 6/30/20. Gerald Paquette Jr., veteran service officer, term to expire 6/30/20. Thomas A. Sears, gas and plumbing inspector, term to expire 6/30/20. John Workman, ambulance coordinator, term to expire 6/30/20. John Workman, civil defense deputy director, term to expire 6/30/20. And John Workman, emergency management director assistant, term to expire 6/30/20. So we need a motion to accept all these appointments.
Want to include the next one?
No, skip the line. Ingrid Warren, historical commission, reappointment, term to expire 6/30/22. Okay, now we need a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And again, we should thank the people for sharing their time
Yes.
on behalf of the town. We know that it could be a hardship for some people, and we really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, no hearings, quarterly reports, master plan implementation committee. Michael Rosenberg's here as the chair. Come on up, Mike.
Good evening, Michael Rosenberg, 144 East Street, Master Plan Implementation Committee. So I am here tonight just to give a little update to the board, where we are, what we're doing, what progress we're making. Since our last meeting, we have finished reading the master plan, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are a lot of pages. We've gone through the master plan as a group. We've kind of had Weekly homework assignments, read, come back, discuss, review, make notes. At this point, we are running through the master plan chapter by chapter. We are looking at the goals and strategies that were in each chapter. We are working on ranking each goal. For a ranking system, we're using some of you may be familiar with SMART goals. So you rank a goal based on specific requirements. We're using SMARTY goals, which has an I and an E at the end of it. So we look at each goal and we basically rank the following with a yes or a no. So specific. Is the goal strategy defined with who, what, where, why, and how, right? If the strategy does, we put a yes. If it doesn't, we put a no. Measurable. Can it be measured and managed? Yes or no. Attainable. Is it feasible? Do we have control or influence over the outcome? Yes or no. Relevant. Is it relevant to the town and its citizens right now? Time bound. Can a time frame be set for completion? Inclusive. Does it include all groups, including those marginalized or previously left out? And equitable. Does it incorporate a fair and just approach and address inequity? So using those 7 requirements, we are reviewing the 175 goals and strategies. We're basically trying to pare down the list to what is feasible, right? What can we actually influence within the next 5 years? And not saying if a goal doesn't meet those criteria, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not a goal to work, but it may not be a goal that we concentrate on in the next 2 years, right? It may go to a different committee. It may be something we ask a different group to look at. So we're doing the SMARTY ranking, which will hopefully pare down the list. Once that's done, we're going to do a cost-benefit analysis of the strategies that passed the first round. We'll kind of look at what can we influence, like I said, within a 2 to 5 year period. What are groups working on today that are sort of easily captured that we can incorporate into the complete and the successes, right? So we're hoping to pare down the, let's see, right now out of the 175, we have 25 that are completed today, 25 that are ongoing or in progress, and 125 which are pending action. So with those two criteria, we're hoping to pare down the 125 to something manageable and rankable that we can move on. So we did discuss a little bit last night I guess the challenges and the opportunities with this, and there are some things that sort of stand out to us that need attention, and even if they don't pass the SMARTY test in the beginning, we still feel that as a town we should look at. For instance, there's maybe 2 or 3 bylaws mentioned in this that we can't necessarily find, right? You know, we look on the website, we kind of ask around, we're not really finding where these are, right? Are they listed somewhere? Are they written, on a piece of paper somewhere in the clerk's office, but maybe not implemented in the town? Specifically, agricultural preservation district bylaws, which were in the, is it 80s or 90s? 90s, right? So the language in the report describes a bylaw that puts some structure to development in agricultural areas, right? So if you're going to build a development on a road with fields on either side, it provides some direction and structure. We really can't find any information on that. So it begs the question, did we adopt the bylaw? Are we following the bylaw? Did we do things without knowing we had that bylaw in the book? So the same thing with cluster bylaws. There was a cluster bylaw review, and I don't know if it was fully adopted, but it sort of made its way forward, and then it seems like it stalled. So kind of asking, why did it stall? Did it just not make its way to public meeting? Are there questions? Development in the water overlay district, right? There's a lot of language about protecting recharge areas, the water overlay district, limiting development in some of those, and we don't necessarily know if that's something reviewed in the development process, reviewed in the building permit application process, right? Does someone look at a map and say, we can't build a house there? A couple other, I think, major challenges for what we're looking at is public infrastructure. Right? You're going to meet this evening about like a small sewer program or something similar, right? So this talks about major sewer. It doesn't necessarily talk about sort of small pocket sewer systems, but, you know, it talks about bringing sewer and bringing water and bringing these public utilities to all areas in town, and, you know, it's the chicken or the egg. Do you get the business to come here and then tell them we'll build it, or you build it and hope they come here? So, you know, that's one of the ones that when we get to that chapter, we'll review and rank, and we'll see what we can do with that. Let's see. And then I think the overall feeling of the plan, you know, what town are we? And I think it differs a little bit with each chapter. We're a rural town, or we're a suburban town, or a town that wants to promote commercial and small industry. It changes, but chapter by chapter, basically, when you read it, you know, and there isn't really a consensus about what the town wants to be when this was written 10 years from then, right? So one of the things we talked about last night, and we talked about it at the end of the evening, and it just kind of rung a chord, was smart growth and development, right? So if you have a town, we are zoned, right? But are we correctly zoned for how we want to go forward? Are we, you know, creating opportunities in areas where we should be utilizing our zoning, or should we look to review? And we talked about, hopefully when this is done, being able to leverage maybe a PVPC organization to really look at the smart growth development of the town, to put a lot of these strategies under that umbrella, you know, because I think a lot of these fit under town development or conservation, right? So the opposite of development in some areas. But it hits a lot of the goals, including land use, zoning, infrastructure, housing, you know, low-income housing, affordable housing. So let's see. Yeah, we are actively reviewing. It's a lot. There's a lot of sort of historical information in here that some of it we just don't know, right? There were people on the committee, the people aren't on the committee now, but we're trying to make headway. You know, if a group is actively working on a strategy, you know, we're not necessarily going to focus on reviewing and ranking, because we have members that are on those committees, so the members we look to encourage the completion of that on the group they're on. That way we're not duplicating tasks, and, you know, concentrating on the ones we can influence the most. So, yeah. Questions, comments?
Well, only a comment. As Francine reports on this, it seems like a lot of interest from the committee to get this going forward and reactivate it, so that's great to hear.
Mm-hmm. It is good, and I think there are strategies that hopefully when we're done with the first review that are sort of simple things that departments can do as well, and through, you know, a memo or some sort of cooperative team, like some of these you could probably take care of in the short term, that don't necessarily need a committee to drive, right? It's just communication, a memo between departments. So as we get closer, we'll try to highlight those and bring them forward.
Great.
Thanks a lot for all you're doing. I'm just wondering if you have identified gaps that might not have been originally. I'm thinking about energy, I'm thinking about senior housing, a number of things that IT, like, are there areas that you feel like you're looking at what's existing, but are you seeing that there's areas that need to be developed?
So there is an energy chapter. It's not as robust as some of the others, to be honest. I think the attention in the plan is focused on development, whether it be economic or, you know, building infrastructure and conservation and open space. So I think the way I read it, those are the two main focuses of the plan. Transportation is on there, but we're actively working those, and I think the state is actively pushing some of those strategies as well. They talk about sidewalks and bike lanes and things, and in the state, through requirements of highway projects and road projects, they're kind of taking care of those strategies for us. You know, if we were to go build a whole new road outside of the plan, then yeah, you'd be working towards that strategy. But some of those are they're kind of self-correcting. Affordable housing does come up a lot, and that to us kind of falls under development and zoning. You know, we have the 10-house rule. At 10 houses, you need an affordable home for a development. We only build 9 home developments in town. Seems like we should change the number, right? I don't know. I mean, it just completely leaves out a segment of the population that can't afford housing, and people are being forced kind of out of their home, forced to move because they can't afford it. And they've lived here their entire life. And I haven't, but we hear stories, from other members of the board.
I think the Housing Committee has been, trying, and CPC also, so I think that it would be good to get your input.
Yeah, and we talk about strategies and ways we could possibly help in the future. Technology comes up, municipal fiber. That was one of the things in here. Yeah, some of them are in there, but like I said, some of them are sort of goals that they're strategies, but the town's kind of working on it to some degree, right? You're pursuing some of these, you're looking at, right, so you take the police and fire stations, right? Those are in the plan, but those are also actively being worked today. Do we concentrate the master plan effort on that, or do we allow the committees that's their charge today to continue working that, right? So we're kind of trying to focus on the ones we can influence today, and then as we look long term, what can we set up going forward? So.
If I could just add one thing, trying to tie in maybe to Reni's question. One of the questions that we talked about last night at the meeting too was the affordable housing issue and how we could tie into CPC funds, given that is one of the 3 criteria or the 3 segments, right, of the CPA Act and so forth. And looking over the chart that had been developed a month or so ago, obviously with everything that's been done and funded through the CPA funds, there's nothing, I think, for affordable housing. So one of our questions was to get a hold of Virginia to find out what might even qualify, because all we've heard about is maybe appliances for a house, but we weren't sure what might actually be done with CPA funds.
Well, Jenica Reynolds, who was on the housing, who just resigned from the committee, wrote up a whole thing before she left and shared it with the housing committee, the existing housing committee, of which Janet Kane is a new member. And they've actually tried a lot of different things, and even within the last year they used some of the administrative funds to bring all the builders and people together to find out what the barriers are to having more affordable housing. We also looked into Easthampton Woods, which is a senior housing, to see, how is that funded, what do they do with the issues of sewer, how many units do they have. So actually there's been a lot. It just doesn't always lend itself to as many possibilities. I keep telling people that the salary or the income limit is actually very high. And so for young people that, maybe don't consider themselves in that category, if there was a property that was reasonably priced, they would likely, the ceiling's pretty high. I forget what it is, Virginia, maybe you remember. But anyway, people might not consider themselves in that category, but the housing limit or the income limit is very high, relatively high. Did you want to say something?
I wasn't going to speak about it, but we kept it back here. This is on something else.
Oh, thank you.
Virginia Ahart, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. We've been dealing with this for now close to 20 years. So we're not experts, but we've had people looking at pieces of property. A piece of property will come up and it'll look like it could be 2, 3 houses. We have in our funds over I'd say now $350,000 that can be put in. One way to go is a habitat house, if we could get a piece of property. There's a number of things that could happen if one of the things they spoke to the planning board about, or they were going to speak to the planning board about, I don't know if it happened, was non-conforming lots right now. there are a number, apparently, in town of small, non-conforming lots that you can't build a home on. Well, maybe you could. Now, I just want to stress, when we're talking about affordable, we're talking about our teachers, the people that work here at Town Hall, the people who work for the town in other ways, our police, full-time fire. They don't meet. They meet affordable housing. We don't have any for them in this town. And it has been one of our serious concerns. And I'd love to meet with anybody that's got any ideas about this. We're having a meeting on the 10th of July, so come to the meeting if you've got any ideas, any one of you out there.
And Michael was talking about when the builders build subdivisions, that 9-lot limit, if you go into 10, you have to build one affordable house. We could change that to 8, 7, 6, 5, and they're always going to build to that level, you know, because they say it's so expensive to build that nth house that they'd have to price all the other ones out of the market. Don't know how accurate, but.
And understandable. We talked about, is there a way to subsidize, you know, one of 9 or one of 10, right? Is there a way funds can be leveraged to help in that situation, or a 2-family home that may conform to the aesthetics of the neighborhood but allows for 2 families there, and it's, you know, smaller square footage, but still fits the you know, the look of the development. So
I may be misquoting, but I think the builders, when they talked about it, said it have to be like $400,000 to $500,000 affordable house, if you will, to make money, and those two things just don't mesh.
Right,
But
and
maybe CPA funds could be used to buy the land, offset it if it was, you know.
And we talk about towns like Easthampton, right, where they have developments that are, you know, below high income, below medium income developments that have been built in the last few years. You know, what are they doing that we are not? Because, you know, they essentially built in an open area, right? And that's the same area we're building in. And if it comes down to the profit margin not being there, you know, unfortunately, there's only so much we can do. But we want to do what we can to encourage that.
A question, Virginia, I hate to drag you back up. So the question was, if a builder is building 9 houses, could we do something and say, hey, build 10, CPA funds could be used to buy that lot as long as it goes to a family with these income restrictions?
We would have to. We could do that. But it isn't just a restriction immediately.
Yeah.
It's a restriction that when they write on their deed that will remain a moderate income home.
But that would be for the people that buy it after that. The developer would be out of it after that.
The people that buy it would have to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, on anything that you're getting, you know, anybody that would be getting funds.
So if there was a builder out there that was interested in doing that, they should come to the CPC to discuss it?
They could. We had the meeting with them, which was, I thought, very successful. Not something that, the only thing that we saw coming out of that meeting was ways to help. And the other thing is, if there was some way to restrict the sale of small, older homes going immediately to someone who is going to build, enlarge, etc. We've had a number of small homes come up for sale. They're either bought immediately by someone or they're bought by, I guess I'll call them a rebuilder. And I could name you a few, but I'm not going to. And so, you know, if a family wanted to buy that at a reasonable price, you know, they can't.
Yeah, it's gone quickly. Being the liaison to the planning committee, what I see is these 9 building lots come up, you know?
Yeah.
So we got to reach out and maybe get that first builder to say, I want to try it and
Yeah.
work with you.
We can work on it.
That's a possibility then.
And I just want to mention, affordable just isn't about housing. I think some of the things that the Master Plan Implementation Committee is looking at, and we'll hear a little bit tonight, about affordable technology for residents of the town, affordable energy for residents of the town, looking at alternatives, that it isn't just the price of the house, it's the cost of living here. And you're paying your monthly bills, and how can we find other ways that are more economical, as well as perhaps even more environmentally friendly. So those are some of the things also that are thrown into the mix, and that's why this becomes such a, I'm not going to say overwhelming, but very daunting experience that we're having on the Master Plan Committee, because it really is everything in the town.
Yes, sir.
I'm just making sure there wasn't anything else.
Any other questions for Michael? Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Okay, we have a presentation from Westfield Gas and Electric on fiber optic internet presentation. Rich was here a couple months ago, Rich?
Yeah, 15 months.
And Francine asked them to come back and do an updated presentation with some more details.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was here a few months ago. We talked about some of the things you have to do to get on the path towards a municipal fiber network, if that's in your future. And the first part is becoming a municipal light plant under Massachusetts regulation. And that takes, I believe, a couple of townwide votes to get a town meeting to start that pathway. What I brought this time, just to give you a little more detail, and get a little more granular, I modeled what I thought Southampton would cost if we were building it today with a municipal fiber network. Some of the data I didn't have was how many road miles do you have of roads? That's to mimic what you have to build for a fiber network.
Any idea, Ed, how many road miles we have? Randall's not here, so.
Well, I guessed 70 miles, so I don't know if I'm close or not close, but...
80-something, I think.
Oh, okay. The cost just went up.
The cost of these always goes up.
And Ed knows, because Ed, when he was in fact that started this process there. But basically, you know, as I talked about, you're entering an arena now where your municipal network essentially competes for the hearts and minds of residents with commercial networks like Spectrum Charter here, Verizon Wireless, next generation Verizon Wireless. So we've done that in Westfield. We have a bit of a leg up because we are the municipal electric provider. We are familiar with poles. We have bucket trucks. We have guys that can multitask and do both kinds of services. But we have been very successful in competing in that competitive environment and winning internet business from the residents of Westfield. Really, you're competing when you build a fiber network with a superior network to the existing networks that are out there. So you can really compete if it's an internet-centric household, if it's a household that knows how to stream television, if it's a younger generation household that's growing up on streaming television. So it is a viable project. This basically models what it might look like. Again, the top portion, I estimated that you had 70 road miles. We could adjust that. And also, we have to put in a figure for how much of that is underground. When you go underground in development, the costs ramp up pretty quickly. Not quite double the cost per foot, but pretty significant. And then, how many telephone poles are there in town? This average that I put in here is 30 poles per mile. Because when you make the space on those telephone poles for your municipal network, you get the privilege of paying the utilities to move their utilities up or down or replacing the telephone pole. So we've seen a cost anywhere from $400 per pole in the town to over $1,100 per pole in the town if the pole infrastructure is very old in the town. I wouldn't imagine it's that old here. We're talking about some of the hill towns that hadn't been touched in decades. Then we look at what I have called here PDUs, Those are premise dwelling units where people live, where businesses are. That's really your income, your future income base. Then you project a percentage of those that you think you would capture over time. That would be your customers. The next portions are really the construction of the network itself. You have a design and engineering phase where literally somebody walks out every telephone pole in the town, maps it out, gets the footages, collects the data on the telephone pole, takes a photograph of it, and you use photogrammetry to determine what the make-ready process would look like as you move other utility networks up and down the pole and see if there's enough room. So all that is conducted, then you hand it over to the utilities, and they then may have to look at it again, or maybe they have to spend time determining what they have to do. Move the electric up or down, move the telephone network up and down, move the cable network up or down. So that's a process that takes a lot of time, probably minimum of 12 months, probably more towards 24 months to get implemented. And then they license you, the MLP, the telephone poles. Then you get to spend your money building the network. Building the network is that construction portion that's on this sheet. And you're looking at really probably over $3 million to build the cable network, to do the drops to the house, and to implement service to customers. That's a quick summary of really the process.
Now, in something like this, can you estimate a payback based on the take rate up here? I'm assuming that's the people that will actually take the service.
Yeah, it's going to depend how you operate it. If you hire employees and stuff, it's different than if you have, and your proximity to Westfield lends itself that we could certainly be a resource for you in a couple different ways. So what we do is towns we're working with, and outside of Westfield, we're working with 20 hill towns right now, constructing their networks. And we'll probably be the operator and internet service provider in most of those networks. And our rate started at over $35 a month, and as we accumulate communities, we have more efficiency, so we pass that along. So by the time we're done with the hill towns, our rate would be probably under $30 per month per customer for our services, which are, we basically answer the phone, take orders, we answer the phone, take problems, we send service techs out to fix problems, and we do all the work, all the forms, all the government regulations required for submission. And then the only thing that's kind of the ad hoc piece is if a telephone pole gets broken and we have to come repair the network, that's an add-on cost. But basically, we can pretty much do the operate the network, soup the nuts for a community if they go in that direction.
So $30 per month per customer is for the full service, basically.
Right. And for instance, in Westfield, we retail that at $69.95 for retail. So there's a margin there that you have to work with. You got to pay back the debt, things like that. There's some incremental costs, the utility cost for your telecommunications hut, items like that. Some towns in the hill towns have gone as high as $110 per customer on a retail side. Depends what their economics look like. We have some towns, some of the hill towns have only 6 homes per mile. So Southampton, it's probably going to come out to be over 20 homes per mile on average. Some of the hill towns, under 6 homes per mile. So they're building a lot of fiber cable plant, and getting very few customers per mile. So the economics,
So the cost is a lot higher for them?
And plus, for every time you're on a telephone pole, you lease that space every year. It's about a $10 or $11 charge per pole per year you pay for.
But that's included in that $30?
No, it's not. That's extra above, the addition to the $30.
So
What would an average look like then, I guess, per household, using this $30 a month add-ons that you're talking about?
It probably depends. These networks are inherently reliable. They sustain. It's usually when a tree comes down, they're going to be repaired. But we've done only a handful of service calls in the towns where we've actually lit up across this winter. So the cost has been extremely low. If we get a huge weather event, then that's when you might have a lot of damage to repair and the costs ramp up. But what you do is you insure yourself against that. So if there's a weather incident and your out-of-pocket costs exceed $10,000, you can buy an insurance policy which covers that event. We also recommend that we have crews, but in a major weather event, we suggest to towns that they bundle together or independently get emergency contractors on board with the retainer. And we write contracts and deal with them, we direct them, but they're guaranteed to show up with crews and trucks that can fix problems in the event that our staff is stretched out in other areas. So we've kind of built in a lot of contingencies to make it operate.
And then just another question. I need to know, how are you, you're municipal, so how are you structured in terms of,
The other
you're not
towns?
a private, for-profit,
We're a municipal entity, so we
Okay.
do it for the shareholders of Westfield, is what we work for. So in Westfield, we have one model. In the other towns where we work for, we set our structure to work for them as a subcontractor. So we have an intergovernmental agreement with the towns that sets us up as network operator and internet service provider. Prior to that, for the construction portion, we're the owner's project manager. So we basically have a suite of contractors that do different things, do the design, do the mapping, do the construction, do the drops of the house, and we usually have them work under our umbrella contracts. And we'll go out for new contracts and always have resources to do that. We also do procurement for all the contracts when it comes specifically to bidding out your construction, bidding out different components. What we do is we have a website we stand up and we go out and, under mass law, do the bidding process.
So you're giving us a figure here of 4.4 million total to get this?
Yeah, now this is not totally accurate. This is in today's costs that we're seeing. But if the road miles goes from 70 to 86 miles, that's going to increase.
Okay.
I guesstimated that you have about 2,000 homes, or PDUs. So I based some of the numbers off that. But this is basically the first run at the numbers, just to give you kind of a scope of what it might cost.
And I know we're kind of late coming into this. Obviously,
Well,
no?
not really. I mean, a lot of towns are in your exact location, process-wise. They're saying, do we want to do this? Do we want to compete? You know, what's the right thing to do? So there's a lot of folks that are in the same area of decision-making that you are.
And I guess then my other question, is there any, I know that initially there was a lot of state and federal money available. Is that still available to help towns build these infrastructure?
Most of the state and federal money is really targeted towards folks that have very poor broadband, like the hill towns, where there's no cable operator. There's limited, if any, DSL in some of these towns, and there's literally no cell service. So you go to some of these towns, that's where the money's targeted. And all the federal money is targeted there, and the state is helping these small towns do this. I think as those issues get solved across the 40 towns that remain in Massachusetts, then you might see future money be released for developing towns that currently have a solution in place.
Okay.
With the estimated 2,000 households in town, which may or may not be right on, what would be the sort of the minimum number that you would want to see buy into the program and be on hookup to make it worthwhile for you to come and even do it?
Traditionally, you have to have 30% market share to make a rebuild overbuild worthwhile. Now, you're a little more rural than a city like Westfield, so that number might increase for you to want to try to strive for 33, 34, 35%.
Now, you all set there?
No, go ahead.
You're talking about internet. Can we do a vote for the telephone on the same fiber optics?
So what we do is when we sell internet, we also, everything, when you take a municipal fiber service, everything becomes an app on that network.
Right.
Telephone's an app on that network. TV becomes an app on that network. You build your own TV service. We don't offer a traditional cable package where you put a box on your set and
Right.
give you a package of 200 channels. What happens is you as a customer build your own TV platform. Maybe you get Netflix, maybe you get Hulu Live. You pick and choose from. There's literally 50 different services you can build your own TV from. So a lot of the customers in Westfield will pick like a Netflix and a Hulu Live, and their TV investment might be $55, $60 a month. But you can still buy HBO, you can still buy all those things, you just can pick and choose yourself from a multitude of providers.
So do we have any more questions?
I just wonder if you could just, I'm just having a couple of questions. Could you just summarize, like, what is the advantage to the residents of Southampton to have this as opposed to what they currently have? And also, what's the advantage to us? And how many of the Hilltown towns in Westfield are actually running this fiber above ground? It just seems like, why are we still putting things in the air? Like, we have storms, we have all kinds of problems that we, it's getting worse before it gets better.
Because it's in the air now because the utility space is in the air. The cost to put it on the poles is about half the cost it is to put it underground. So this $4 million could easily turn into $8 million if you put it underground. Everybody does a cost-benefit analysis and determines that if you have aerial poles available, it's just a long-term better solution. Even though you pay a rental on the poles and such, there's still what they call backhoe fade when it comes, somebody digs up the cable, then it's just more expensive to repair. So, underground utilities are just more expensive. It can be done. There's different technologies that are trying to make it more inexpensive, micro boring, things like that, but it hasn't been proven to be the solution at this point.
So if we had new neighborhoods that were all underground, can't you just use the same conduit and put it underground?
There may not be a conduit, because then nobody planned to put an extra conduit in. For a long time now in Westfield, we're the electric company, so we always put extra conduit in. If we go to a building, we dig a line, we dig a street up, we put extra conduits in. And they've been doing that for years in preparation for building a fiber network. But a lot of the existing developments won't have that. You can actually, you would plow it in on the tree belt, cut driveways, put it in, things like that. But yeah, it's still more costly than having aerial location of the pole.
So if there's not access there, then it's twice as expensive.
Yeah, and even when it comes to a house drop, like where I live, I have utility poles, but it goes underground to my house because I put conduit in.
Right.
We can actually plow in a microduct, which is just like a tractor with a blade that plows it into the side of someone's house and leaves you a tube from the pole to the house, which minimizes the cost, but it's still more expensive.
So could you just tell us what's the advantage to the residents in town and to us as a municipality?
Is it cost, quality, both?
Yeah, it's cost, quality, plus revenue, because the residents, we're paying you the money essentially to have the service. The quality of the network is far superior than the existing cable technology. I was in the cable business for 28 years, launched cable modems here in Southampton as part when I was at Greater Media and then Charter 20 years ago. It's about 10 times the speed of the current average cable connection, both up and down from the internet. So basically, it really enhances the work from home. It enhances any business that comes to the town would have the capability to get a much more affordable telecommunication services at a higher quality and speed.
So what is the speed, just?
Well, the networks we build, we offer 1 gig service today, 1,000 megabyte service both up and down, but they're capable of upgrading to 10 gigs both up and down without any changing of the equipment.
Definitely faster than mine.
Right.
You may have already gone over this, but is there a payback period or is there a return on investment? Like, at what point do you break even on this?
It depends really on how you're structured cost-wise. For instance, most people plan on trying to make up their operational deficiencies in 5 years, then go cash flow positive and start to contribute to pay down their debt. Most municipalities they're going to pay down their debt in 20 years, over 20 years. So it's not, you're in a hole out the gate until you get customers on. Then once your customers build up enough.
So once you ramp up.
Yeah, but you got to really do that individually based on your business plan. That's why it's a little bit easier in the case where if you use somebody like a Westfield Gas and Electric, you knew your fixed cost was $30, you knew your pole rental cost, you knew all that, you could put that in a business plan and see where you can start to become cash flow positive.
So if we said go today, how long does it take in general to have it up and going?
It's, well, you'd have to become an MLP.
Right.
After that, then it's probably a, let's call it 18-month process, 2 years between design engineering, walking out the town, and getting the poles ready to put your network on. So it's about a 3-year project.
Okay.
Would customers still have the option of doing something like Charter? I mean, of course, they'll have the
Oh, yeah.
option of doing DirecTV.
You're compete,
but-
yeah.
So would we be competing, or would it be a monopoly like it is right now?
You would be-
Charter's the only game in town.
Well, I don't know if they are, because you got a Verizon network, you got wireless service.
Well,
You'd be competing in
DirecTV still have-
that arena with them, but people will still have the Charter would still be an option for people. They already have the network on the poles that's not going away. So what they have is probably a fully loaded TV product at a high cost, but your internet service you'd be building in would be superior to that. So depends on household by household, people are going to make decisions on taking your service versus the Charter service.
Are you confident that this is actually going to be it's not going to become obsolete? I mean, you just mentioned about wireless. I mean, are we really going to be using fibers for 20, 30, 50 years?
I'm concerned about that, too.
Yeah, that's a genuine concern. We don't know what 5G is going to bring with future wireless technology. We don't know if it'll come to a place like Southampton. We know it'll come to Boston and the suburbs around Boston, but will it come to Westfield? Will it come to Southampton? We don't know. We see that the hill towns don't even have cellular service, let alone 5G. On the back of 5G, the way that technology works is you have a lot of small cells doing a small area. Will their business plan with a small number of houses in that cell range support the infrastructure? And so that's the whole business decision Verizon makes. But those 5G antennas are supported by a fiber. So in our business plan, we look at leasing fiber to those 5G cells as one of the places we can bring revenue in the future from a fiber network.
This may be a too picky a question, I'm not sure, but suppose you put in your system down East Street, for example, and right now there's 40 houses that would be interested, and yet there's another 60 houses that maybe just want to stay where they are, they don't know yet, they haven't decided. To what extent do you put in the whole system so that when and if somebody then decides to join on, it's ready?
Good question. When you're building it, you build it for everybody, because you don't know where those 40 houses are.
Gotcha.
And actually, when we build systems, we have to have a fiber that's designed for every house.
Okay.
And we build in, also we talk to the town and say, where are your growth areas? Because we're going to put extra fibers in to serve these potential growth areas. And then we're going to add 15 or 20% on top of that, because the fiber is very inexpensive. It's all in the labor to put it up. So you don't want to put up fiber later. Mm-hmm. You want to build in that inexpensive resource now, and you want to future-proof the network.
So you run dark fiber just for that purpose down the road?
Yep.
Okay.
We run big strands of dark fiber, literally, and have a single fiber for every house. And that fiber communicates bidirectionally to that house.
Okay, so when I want it on my house there, you just tap the fiber at the street and bring it in? Is that it?
Yeah, we actually put these, I'll call them taps. Yeah. They're called MSTs. Multi-service terminals that basically we plug in. You have your fiber distribution network on the pole. You have the box there. We plug in a fiber that goes just to your house, and then it goes into your house. Actually, I brought a picture of what we put in the house.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Some of you got the nice color ones. Basically, the left side it's called a network interface device, which goes on the side of the house. So as you go counterclockwise from that NID, in the cellars, that white box at the bottom, an optical network terminal, which is where the fiber terminates. Then it runs via computer wire or Cat6 wire up to a central spot in the house where we put a wireless router in. That can service the entire house. We do wireless extenders if needed that customers buy themselves. We do things like that, but basically you blanket your house in Wi-Fi, or you can direct connect to the router. and you can provision all your TVs with streaming devices. Your phone connects to this.
So is this all provided as part of the monthly service, or do they have to buy these or pay extra?
As for the monthly service, we put in essentially the
Router?
the municipality buys everything up to the ONT. They buy the wire, and we provide this router.
Gotcha.
And we provide a tele unit that does telephone. Those are what Westfield does now. We provide those.
And you said the first step was to become an MLP first. Can you explain a little bit what that means? What does it take to do that?
There's a Massachusetts regulations, I think it's chapter 64. Basically, you have a right as a municipality to become an MLP. And you have to, I believe it's get a vote at town meeting 2 years in a row to become an MLP. Is that what?
Yeah, 2 votes.
Right, 2 votes. Ed's been through it before. And what that really gives you the right to do is to request space on the telephone poles. And then you can start to request licenses of the poles and go through the make-ready process and things like that.
Are those 2 years built in to that 3-year?
No, no,
That's in addition to?
yeah.
This isn't going to be ready tomorrow.
I see.
Yeah,
Or even,
it's a long and frustrating process because as you get the other utilities, you're spending a lot of money, and you're getting them. They have to go do work on the poles. And for instance, in the 20 towns that Westfield's doing now in the hill towns, there's over 26,000 telephone poles that have to be worked on. So,
tells you where the jobs are.
well, we wish they'd hire more people, but they don't seem to be. But it's, it could be an economic, certainly help the economics of the town. It attracts people. We get people all the time that call and say, I'm buying the house in Westfield, I can buy this one, but where's your fiber network? If it's not in this neighborhood, I'm going to buy that house where the fiber network's available, things like that.
So in Westfield, you've set this up, it's been running. Has it been producing the profit margin that you?
Yeah, it's actually, we're above projections.
Can you share what percentage or how you estimate?
I don't even know because I wasn't there to do the original business plan, but it's exceeding what they projected. We actually did a pilot program they did a pilot program before I got there back in 2014, where they had to prove it out to the Municipal Light Board in order to go forward. Then they bonded for $15 million to build out. We've only built out 70% of Westfield. We're accumulating cash now to build out the balance of Westfield. The Hilltown projects help us accumulate extra cash to build out the rest of Westfield.
So of the 70% of Westfield, what percentage of the people actually took the service?
It's once you get a neighborhood that's had service for like 3 months, we've done all the installs. It's somewhere as high as 50%, as low as 20%. The average is in the 30s.
So it's more like neighbors talking to the neighbors type?
Yeah, word of mouth is the biggest reason people take service. Lawn signs we put out when you take service is number 2 reason.
Okay. Any more questions?
I can speak as a customer if you want.
You have to come up here, John.
John Workman, Belanger Road. Yeah, because I'm right on the line, I've actually gotten the service from them. It's like $70 a month, and everybody on my street now has got it replaced because cable bills are like $150 for some of these folks. When I got the package, they had offered a deal where you get just an antenna that you put on your house. I probably get 50 stations that are just
Antenna or antenna, John?
Antenna.
It's like a DAS antenna?
Digital antenna, yeah.
A digital antenna. It's this big,
Yeah.
thin. Probably 50 stations. It comes in just like cable. It's great. I mean, I don't know, the wireless question is kind of a good one because you don't know what that technology will do. But as far as like the product goes, it's great. It's fast. It's competitive with any other internet that you can get. So I would be an advocate for it. Unless new technology comes through, I mean, it really has the potential to draw people and businesses. So I would
That's good.
just throw a plug that direction.
It begs the question, Rich. Can we just tee off of
Yeah,
John's
absolutely.
house and keep going in town? I mean, could Westfield literally supply part
Well,
of
one of the
town?
notes I put out there, you basically put a telecommunication someplace where the internet comes in and you start to distribute.
But I mean, could we,
And actually,
you're going to have to go back up.
because of the proximity to Westfield, we could essentially extend service into Southampton without that extra centralized telecommunications hut investment.
So without the MLP?
No, not without the MLP, because you have to be able to get on the poles. But,
So you can't get on our poles and extend the service?
no,
Okay.
but we're not an MLP in Southampton. We're not the municipal entity in Southampton.
Okay, so there's no way around that legally?
No. No.
Guess
You
we'll have
put
to
your
do it
own-
at night, John. So, but you could,
We could take the Westfield system technically
yeah,
and extend it into Southampton without you having to invest in the centralized components of it. We could essentially make it part of
so
Westfield.
what would that save us off this listing here?
I think there's a line item called network telecommunications with components at $200,000.
That's it.
That's it, yeah.
That's it.
I was hoping you were going to say 2 million.
Yeah,
but-
I was looking-
I was trying to put that extra zero or two in there, but it didn't work.
Okay. Okay, any more questions? No. You have us a lot to think about, Rich. I really appreciate you coming
No
back.
problem.
Thank you. With this,
Business cards?
yep, with this extra detail, it gives us a lot more to think about, for
Yeah, I
sure.
figured that's kind of like,
And you,
that's simply what we're looking at.
I'm assuming you wouldn't mind a visit from all or some of us at some point down to?
Yeah, you want to come to, it's not far from here, so you want to go over and see the technology and kick the tires, certainly.
It's
That'd
a
be
great
great.
tour. Mhm. I've taken part of it. It's amazing.
Is it? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank Joe and everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we have,
Good seeing you again.
okay. We have a presentation, wastewater presentation of small sewers, Mary Louise Monahan and Kurt Mailman. Either of those folks here?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they
Coming in. Yeah, I just told them to come in.
Hi, you're up. Do you want
Are we-
to put that in the corner there?
Yeah?
Okay.
Which corner is the best?
I'm guessing that one. And right underneath on the shelf, there is a microphone that if you want to speak from over there, everybody can hear you and you'd be recorded. But first you need to introduce yourself at the mic,
Okay. This mic or that mic?
whichever.
Okay.
Just don't do them close together.
And you don't want to block the white one. There you go.
You can turn the white one sideways if you want. We have so many rules here, huh?
That's what I like this. Okay.
Go ahead.
We're ready?
We're ready for it.
Okay, super, thank you. So I'm Mary Monahan. I'm with Fuss & O'Neill. That's Kurt Mailman. He's also with Fuss & O'Neill. And we're here tonight to continue a conversation that began in August of 2017 to talk about small sewers and potential funding opportunities. So before we go into the conversation, I wanted to just give a little bit of background as to who Fuss & O'Neill is and who we are, because many of you weren't here back in August of 2017. So Fuss & O'Neill is a consulting firm with 350-plus professional staff, engineers, scientists, planners. We have an office in Springfield. Our market is mostly municipal, roads, bridges, water, wastewater, planning. And that being said, I'm not an engineer. I'm actually, I come from the municipal side of things. I'm a former town administrator, public works director, elected clerk treasurer. So I've been in consulting for almost 20 years. And what I do is I add to the discussion between the local boards of selectmen and the municipality to help engineers understand how local projects need to fit in with that fiscal, political, and schedule that municipalities have. So I'll have a couple of things to talk to you about after Kurt gives his introduction and a brief presentation about wastewater that deal with the funding of anything you want to do moving forward.
Okay. Good.
Did
I
you?
was going to say, before Kurt talks, you want to give him the microphone?
I'm going to.
Okay, and Kurt, could you move that?
Yes.
Because I get a feeling Rini down there
Yeah.
can't see much. There
That's-
you go.
That's better, thanks.
Is this better?
Yep.
All right. How's this? Push the button. How's that?
Is that on, Ryan? Yeah, he says
Okay.
on.
Okay, he's going
Okay.
to have to hear it, I guess.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll try to stand over here so I don't block everyone's view. As Mary said, my name is Kurt Mailman, and I am a dirty water guy. I've been in wastewater for the last 30 years, believe it or not. And so I've got a lot of experience working with small communities like yours. I'm actually, if you're familiar with the New England Water Environment Association, I'm the chair of the Small Communities Committee, and our role as a committee is to help small communities that have less than 1 million gallons a day of wastewater flow. So we do a lot with small communities, a lot with small flows. And what we thought we could do today is talk about a little bit about your situation here in Southampton and maybe give you some ideas and things to follow up on and carry on the discussion and the dialogue and further it to help you with your wastewater needs. Okay, so bringing you back probably almost 2 years now, we came with a similar set of drawings. Charlie over here probably remembers that discussion. And there's really there are two primary areas of concern, although there might be others that you might identify for wastewater dispersal needs. And so this drawing shows you the Pequot Pond area, which is half sewered into Westfield. I'm sure you've seen similar before. The purple areas here are Zone 2 aquifer protection areas, and the red is the existing infrastructure that exists, including a pump station on Long Pond Road. And that pump station was actually sized to accommodate flow from Southampton when it was designed. So there's a piece of infrastructure that's already in place along the Pequot Pond. So what are the things of concern associated with that area? Well, it's very densely populated. There are about, I want to say about 400 properties there. And the soils actually are pretty decent. They're well-draining soils. Unfortunately, they're draining nutrients into the Pequot Pond. So there are issues with water quality as a result. And so, and that's the primary reason why the lower section of Pequot Pond was sewered in Westfield many years ago. So people may not notice that there's a wastewater issue because the effluent is actually traveling quickly through the soils, so it's very rapid. This second drawing here just shows, again, here's to orient you, here's where the pump station exists, and there's a little bit of collection system over here as well.
How many of those 400 or so homes are actually hooked up to the Westfield sewer system there?
There are 400 in Southampton.
Oh, so 400 are all in sewer, okay. Oh.
Those aren't on sewer, those are the ones that should be, those are the
Correct.
Right, those
Right.
are not.
There
Right,
there aren't
okay.
any
Okay.
on the northern side.
Before I go on, now I'm confused. Are there Southampton homes hooked up to the Westfield?
No.
Okay, none,
No.
okay.
All the infrastructure ends at the line.
Okay.
And so
I
there's
should have showed you
400
where the line was.
400
So-
homes
so
in
is-
Southampton that are not connected, that are presumably polluting, really?
There have been studies that have indicated that there's nutrient issues there going back to, I believe, 1987.
Okay.
So,
And so
it's
that's
not a
hard.
new issue, but there hasn't been, historically, there hasn't been action to work with that.
So that existing pumping station is servicing Westfield?
Yes. But previous studies showed that there was 50,000 gallons a day capacity built into that pump station to handle Southampton's flow if and when they ever wanted to tie in.
And that's
But just for that area?
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Just for that area, though?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
just
right.
for the Pequot area.
That's right.
And that capacity is still there as far as you know?
Yes.
Okay.
And what does that represent in terms of homes?
that would
The 400?
theoretically handle the northern section of Pequot Pond. Okay.
Well, let them do the presentation, yeah.
So the other area that we spoke about a couple of years ago was the Route 10 corridor, okay? So here's your line between Southampton and Westfield. And this area is currently not served by any public sewers. There are, as I showed you before, there are some sewers in Westfield just over the line. And there were some studies that were done that previously that recommended sewering the entire town of Southampton by various means, some connections to Westfield by public sewer and some more decentralized community type sewers and systems. So one of the recommended areas was a groundwater discharge off of the Manhattan Meadow, just to the west of the Manhattan Meadow. And what I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes is some newer technologies that make that a little bit more attractive and maybe a little bit more cost effective than previous recommended plans. There's also an opportunity potentially to route some of the areas with issues with septic issues and decentralized wastewater issues to Easthampton. So back and forth through the years, there have been discussions to connect to Easthampton or not, depending on their capacity. So those are things that you can also consider. Westfield presumably has enough capacity to handle wastewater and process it at their wastewater treatment plant. Easthampton reportedly also has some capacity available. And I've worked with a number of communities to formulate agreements, intermunicipal agreements, to make those a reality, so that they're very, it's important to craft those in such a way that it protects the community. I've got a lot of experience doing that. So this Route 10 corridor here, the idea was generally to foster economic growth along that corridor rather than to abate pollution problems. And so there may be some areas, you've got wide open spaces along this corridor, so in theory you should be able to find that 4 feet of separation to groundwater because you got large parcels and you can pick and choose. So the focus from the Pequot area is more water quality. This is more of an economic development focus. And it could also process, you could also process flows from the northern section of Route 10, either to Easthampton or down to what we call a community system. This is just showing the directional arrows of where the wastewater theoretically would come from. This is just a quick graphic that corresponds to why there's a potential pollution problem by surface water areas like the Pequot Brook. You have to get that separation to groundwater, and in a lot of instances you can't have that unless you mound systems, but they're very expensive to do on a parcel by parcel basis. So what ends up happening is there's a possibility that you hit the groundwater regime because the soils are so permeable and the pollutants travel quickly out into the surface water bodies. So I've talked a little bit about concerns and issues and locations. I'm going to talk now a little bit about technologies to assist. And there are some newer technologies that are available that probably weren't when the original sewers were constructed in Westfield. And one of them is low pressure sewers. And I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with them, but essentially the old way of doing a sewer system, particularly with a lot of topographical change, would be to collect your pipes in your gravity sewer and have a series of pump stations to pump up over the hills. Okay, but what that does is it requires depth when you get to high points in the area, you have a deep excavation, which is very costly, particularly if you're in groundwater. So the newer style is really to implement individual miniature, what they call grinder pumps on each property. And what that allows you to do is only dig 4.5 feet instead of dig as deep as you need to get connected by gravity. So there's a cost savings. On the other side of the ledger, each individual house has a small grinder pump sited to process their flows. So, people would ask questions about, well, what about power supply and redundancy, things like that. So these grinder pump systems are built with connectors so that they can, you could put a portable generator out. You can essentially make them almost idiot-proof.
So it's almost like a sump pump that grinds, then pushes it up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the systems are sized with telescoping sized pipes based on the number of pumps that are in the line. So the first 3 pumps would have a small size, and then the sizes would get larger as you went through the system. But the real benefit is if you're on bedrock, it reduces that, and it also helps you with water control during construction. Here's a cutaway of what that pump would look like. Okay, it's got a rotor and a stator and a grinder mechanism, and they're very reliable. Not only that, they don't use much electricity. It's like the equivalent of like a 40-watt light bulb.
So does that go, when you flush a toilet or whatever, does that automatically put the pump on? Or is there a reservoir that it collects for a while, then it pumps it out?
Yeah, there's a small holding tank in each one of these. Usually it will range between 20 and 40 gallons. If you had a commercial building, they would sometimes double those up or make a wider base to it with a larger collection area so that you could store more wastewater before it pumps.
So it saves energy and
yes.
wear and tear?
Yep. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the technology available for community systems. Okay, so what I've got here is a thumbnail graphic of what the 1990s, early 2000s small treatment system would entail. So you've got some clarifiers, circular clarifiers, and you've got some aeration tanks, and you've got sludge, and it's a pretty large footprint. And generally the engineering design standards would allow you to have additional footprint to add additional tankage or clarifiers, things like that. So I was just showing this graphic to show you that the new systems, of which the membrane bioreactor, which I show over here on the left, they're much more compact. They actually essentially come on flatbed trucks, and they're modular. So you can stack them one after the other, taking up a smaller footprint and really allowing you to make the capital expenditure in parts or in pieces rather than a huge capital expenditure all at once. Some communities under this style would overbuild their wastewater treatment plants. They wouldn't have enough flow. Then they wouldn't have enough microorganisms to process the wastewater, and it would cause upsets and poor treatability. These modular systems produce a very high quality effluent, almost drinkable effluent that you can disperse.
Almost.
And almost. The newest thing on the horizon, the real cutting edge view of these, particularly when you have a really high quality effluent, is to implement what they call smart sewers. And smart sewers actually act as a resource recovery tool where you would theoretically, if you had buyers, sell the water for irrigation and sell the sludge that comes out of the tanks annually or quarterly, and actually turn that into a revenue stream for the facility. So, that's where we're heading as an industry, and probably in my lifetime we're going to see it expand. It's in the Northeast, it's a little less accepted right now, because we tend to be a lot more conservative in the Northeast, but it's going to happen. So just a couple of pictures down below, you can see this is a treatment system. This is an MBR system. It looks pretty ugly, but it's just dropped off modular flatbed. And this is another system here. This one is in Littleton and processes 40,000 gallons a day. Pretty small footprint. That's the treatment piece. You still have to disperse it. You still need to get it in the ground. So you need some kind of system to, to disperse your effluent. Here's another example. This is a different type. This is called an amphidrome. Again, a lot of this is buried. All you would see is this small control building. You've got an anoxic tank for conversion of the nutrients. And you've got a bioreactor here, clear well reactor, and your pumps out to your dispersal system. So what it does is it intermittently, with blowers, adds oxygen and then takes it away. That's the way you nitrify and denitrify, which removes the nitrogen pollutant. So once you've got your clean effluent out of one of these systems, then you need to do the dispersal. And very new in the industry and becoming ever more accepted is drip dispersal. And what drip dispersal does is it discharges through small tubes, small 5/8 inch diameter tubes that have little perforations and emitters. And they allow you to actually plow in, for those of you who are familiar with farming, you actually use a little plow, and you don't have to dig a huge bed the size of this building anymore. You can actually plow these little tubes in, and each little emitter discharges a known amount of flow every pump cycle. So what are the benefits? It's easy to construct, very shallow bury, so you don't have to, if there's places with bedrock and high groundwater, helps you get that separation because now you're in the upper soil horizon, and it becomes more cost effective to install. So that's something that's fairly new on the horizon. One of the gentlemen from Oakson is one of the manufacturers, and he actually was on the Small Communities Committee out of Gloucester, Mass, and he's been one of the champions of that technology. There are really two manufacturers that do that type of drip dispersal, but it's ever more common in the Commonwealth. Here's another, I forgot to mention, I'm also a member of NAURA, which is the National On-Site Wastewater Renovation Association. So we go on field trips and look at who's doing what all around the country in terms of decentralized wastewater. Here's a different style. These are called pressure distribution nodes, and these are essentially infiltrator chambers with pressure dosing. Again, this would be not in the same soil horizon as the drip dispersal. It would be a little bit lower, but still pretty high in keeping that 4-foot separation. And these would have pumped cycles at a certain interval to evacuate all the wastewater that was generated from your treatment system. And that's pretty much the thumbnail sketch of a few issues and some potential solutions.
So the effluent that's going out the tubes are in here. I mean, if you're doing this for years and years and years, do you have to replace it or move them, or?
That's a good question. So typically, all of these things are sized appropriate for a certain dispersal over a certain area, okay? Certain gallons per day per square foot in technical terms. The power of having a high quality wastewater treatment system up front, it's almost like putting water into the ground. So because there's not a lot of bacteriological growth, it's not like a septic field at that point because it's almost clean water. So there's not a lot of biomass or biomat that forms in these systems. So if they're sized with the right gradation, you do have to do some soils analysis to make sure you've got proper permeability of the soil. But once they're established, if they have a packaged system up front, they will last a very, very long time.
So it sounds like Hamden Ponds, there's some potential from Westfield. There's maybe some tie-in from Easthampton and Westfield. I know this was all looked at before, and I'm sure, Charlie, you're going to have some information. Or we can build mini plants ourselves.
Right. Community plants.
So you're here presenting this, and I guess the obvious question is, what can you do? What do you recommend? Because we're pretty new at this, and I think we all would agree that if we can get some sewer system in here, even if it's partial, it'd be a big step in where we're going.
Well, what we like to do is integrate in with the overall townwide planning, and generally comprehensive wastewater management plan does that as part of its, as part of its protocol, as part of the deliverable. Massachusetts is very stringent on their programs and what they accept and what they don't. So usually it's a stepped process where the boards and commissions and the wastewater folks come together and formulate what the town-wide needs are through that comprehensive wastewater management plan. I think the last one that was done was maybe 97-ish, so it might be a good time to take another look at that.
22 years ago.
Okay.
So, you want me to add to that?
Sure.
So,
Do you need this?
I've got one here. So what Kurt talked about is great, because there are all these options depending on why you need to do it or why you want to do it, whether it's water quality, whether it's economic drivers. And all of those options bring with them additional funding opportunities to help get you started. So Kurt noted the CWMP, the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, and as he said, Mass DEP, which manages a lot of the funding that would be available for your project, would require an update to your CWMP in order to give you monies to keep moving forward. And that update to the CWMP would do exactly what Kurt was just talking about. It would look at what do you want to do, why do you want to do it, where does it need to be put, and requires the community to be part of it. It's not only looking at the hard infrastructure that you might want to put into the ground, but it takes into consideration input from the town, because the town at some point is going to be paying for this. It looks at how are you going to pay for this. There's multiple ways, whether it's user fees, whether it's betterments on the properties that are being bettered as a result of having access to sewers, whether it's a combination of those plus taxes. All that is part of that discussion. How much will it cost? How do we pay for it? And it also looks at your environmental impacts. You know, the DEP doesn't want you to do anything that's going to make situations worse. So as Kurt noted, it's a very prescriptive process. So we would go back to looking at what you have done. It would be updated based on new technologies, new priorities from the community, and in particular what Mass DEP thinks is important, because at some level they actually hold the purse strings. So the state revolving fund, which is a loan program, that can be a source of funding for this. It's also a future source of funding for any construction phase. It's a 0 to low interest loan that can be extended up to 30 years. Most traditional borrowings are only 20 years. That would let you go a little bit longer. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, that's another potential funding source. And depending on income levels in the communities being serviced, that could be a combination grant loan or a loan only.
And they're flush with money right now.
Pardon?
They're flush with money right now. The USDA-RD is looking for projects to fund.
And they have projects that actually fit into some of the study phases. So the other opportunities out there, especially along the Route 10, is MassWorks. And that's a state grant that looks at infrastructure needs associated with economic development, particularly job creation.
We just received one for the bridge.
Okay, so that's an annual opportunity to go after funding. I don't know how old the bridge one was, and you must have had an economic development tie-in to it, because it's really focused now on making sure that there's a private party, a private initiative associated with it. For example, a business that would locate here and bring these jobs if they had access to wastewater treatment, or a business that might think they have to leave because they don't have access to business. So MassWorks is out there. There's an application due in August. I don't think you have time to put together the kind of quality application, but think about next August. The other opportunity out there is EEA just closed on a planning grant to do studies. It was up to $50,000, and one of the eligible projects included looking at village center wastewater management. So with the right words being used in an application, you could deem many of these sites as village center or, economically development driven to look at what might the wastewater needs be, because Kurt and the engineers can't pick a solution without that kind of study. It's not like, let's just go do this tomorrow. And then the other major...
That just closed?
That just closed in May. And the other opportunity, but that's an annual. So the other one that I really like talking about, because it's almost, I shouldn't say this on TV, but it's also like write your own grant, is the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program.
We talked about that.
Okay, so I've worked with almost 30 communities now in doing an MVP, and we recently, our communities, 8 of them got $2.5 million to do some of their infrastructure work that came out of this MVP planning process. So you definitely want to stay alert. I can let you know when the next MVP planning grant hits the streets so that you can go through the planning process, which is funded by a grant.
They just had a deadline, but I was told that there was another summer cycle.
There's supposed to be. EEA has said that there's going to be another cycle in summertime. They've had 3 on the planning side, and they've had 2 on the action grants. So the action grants are where the big dollars are. The action grants are where you can go after the funding to dig down a little bit deeper into the planning and the study of what do we want to do here. And then what we've learned with these 2 rounds of action grants is after you do those studies, again, there's always got to be a climate change discussion associated with it, whether it's flooding that would affect soils, that would affect, treatment options. Once you do that initial study, EEA was true to their word, and they funded now the construction projects that came out of that. So that's what we got for communities, the second round. So you need to get through the planning first to become a certified MVP community, and then you're eligible for applying for the action grant rounds. And right now, the governor and the legislature are pretty comfortable discussing that over the next 10 years, they plan to have $10 million available to support these types of projects.
Per year or total?
Per year. Yeah. The governor's office and the legislature are putting a lot of monies into climate change resiliency. And another component of it, I heard another previous discussion, is energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, emissions, and all that. And that's,
Emergency management.
yeah, and that's all part of it, and there's a new Greenworks bill that's out there too that's going to complement and add to these opportunities. But you almost need to know where do you want to go with that. So that's why these initial studies become very important. You need to have a plan. The community needs to have thought it out and looked at the technological opportunities as well as the limitations.
Questions? A lot to think about for sure. I think there's some opportunity that we need to pursue. Questions, though?
No, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Do you have your contact information?
I do. Do you want to leave the boards behind?
Sure.
We did that the last time too. We'll leave the boards if you...
Oh, I can't put
Oh, okay, sorry.
I've got your contact.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
I don't think it was ever on.
So you're not?
Yep.
Are you going to leave that here?
We'll leave this here.
Oh, that'd be great. Really appreciate it. Oh, Charlie, go ahead, get up. You were involved with this originally, correct?
I've been involved with this since 1997.
Well, they should know you, but introduce yourself.
I'm Charlie Konecki, 146 Valley Road. I participated in this stuff as the Board of Health back then, and this has a very interesting theme that it's like a reoccurring story that gets to the Select Board and it slows down. The original push was to take and put sewers into the Hamden Ponds area. There was no question with the nitrogen loading problems there were there and the lot sizes and all the rest of that, that was a push that needed to happen. That was one of the reasons the city of Westfield designed and constructed their pumping station to accommodate that. Another part of what Southampton did back then was that they hired SEA consultants to take and move forward with this. If you look, because I sit on the capital committee, we're still paying the debt off of that for all that work that was done. And it was good work. We just never moved forward on it. Another thing that occurred in Southampton was the establishment of Big Y Foods. Big Y Foods, and I believe all the neighboring stores, are actually tied to the city of Easthampton sewer line.
Right.
There's no intermunicipal agreement between Southampton and Easthampton. This is an agreement between these companies and Easthampton. But you're slowly watching College Highway on the Easthampton side being sewered by Easthampton. And I think we need to get involved in that as it moves along, especially with all the commercial property goes all the way down to the river down there.
Right, and Queen Bee, which is major for water and sewer, obviously.
Yep, that car wash definitely had to be tied to that. There's no way a septic system would handle it. So being involved in this for all these years, I want to just throw out something. It might be time for the Select Board to create an ad hoc committee to start working on sewer lines in Southampton. Route 10 is another one over on the Westfield side. We have all the industrial land zoned out there and everything, but there really isn't any soils that are conducive to that. Most of it is ledge out there. A sewer line would certainly enhance companies to come in there to be tied into it. The land's there. But I think trying to do it from a selectman's seat, you guys are too busy with too many moving parts to try to focus on this one thing. So,
Well, I know, Charlie, that when we had this presentation before, I was very impressed with it because it was focused on limited sewer. Everyone's like, oh, we have to have sewer in the whole town. And I asked about having them come back because just thinking about all the land right now for sale just on Route 10 and all the discussion about economic development, if you look at the Westfield end with it being, you know, between J&E and potential there as well as the Easthampton side, it just seemed like there was a great opportunity to consider moving forward without having to feel like you have to do everything.
I agree. I don't see any reason to do the town.
Right.
But what I'm looking at, Hamden Ponds has a pollution control problem.
Right.
You know, we put town water out there because of the TCE contamination problem. We addressed that because it was an emergency concern. But the long-term, slow-reacting stuff of nitrogen loading and effluent, so on and so forth, into the groundwater, we're not addressing, but we're all acknowledging exists. If you were at Cape Cod, this would be a major issue right now because they have a sole source aquifer there. Here, it's a slow burn, so we're not noticing it. But I'm bringing it full loop. I think you need to start looking at putting an ad hoc committee together, get some people, there's plenty of people with background in this town, to see if they'd volunteer some time. And yeah, there is federal funding. You're seeing stuff coming out of my emergency management office of fundings that we would never even think was coming around.
Carol, that's great. Thanks so much for offering.
So, did you do this to me again?
Well, when you think about it, an ad hoc committee makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like the Open Space Review Committee. You took a group of people who had an interest and got things going, and it's going well. You know, doing this would be the same thing.
Well, I learned sitting there that you couldn't dedicate the time you needed to. You needed to have a committee on the outside.
I think 5 of us would agree with you. So, but you can also, with the ad hoc committee, give some priorities, if you will, check the Easthampton side, check the Hampton Pond
Right.
side, check the Westfield side, and you could work on those ways. So I think we need to discuss, let's put it on our next agenda.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To discuss developing an ad hoc committee to study the various options for bringing sewer into Southampton. Can we do that, Ed? Thanks. Thank you, Charlie, appreciate it. I don't know, Chief, you're going to have cable and you might have sewer? You know.
And a clean pond would be one.
Okay, now we have reports. Select Board, Rini, would you like to start?
Sure. I was at the last open space, John, so if you want me to just update.
If you would, yeah.
Okay, so the neighborhood outreach grant was completed on the 15th of June by the deadline. Everything was submitted to Sarah Wells from Mount Grace Land Trust. It's a reimbursement grant, so the final amount was $6,094. $94? Yeah, $94. So that will be awarded. And it was a very successful project. There were 3 great programs that were held, brought landowners together, and there have already been people that have followed up with Kestrel about land conservation. Things are moving along with the Clearwater Woodland, as we signed off on tonight, and I think that's, we're looking at the fund for land donation and maintenance, either through Kestrel or something within the town. At the next meeting, the treasurer's going to come in and talk about a mass general law that focuses on a town having their own fund for conservation versus doing something through a third party like Kestrel. And we talked about the municipal vulnerability preparedness grant. So that's open space. Community preservation hasn't met, but hang on. Virginia had said that, and you're right here, Virginia's still right? That the Community Preservation Coalition is working on outreach to the legislature for the state with a public appeal through a letter to the editor campaign, and she's going to be speaking with the coalition coordinator this morning, and we'll be writing a letter probably to the Gazette. Do you want to say anything more about that? Nope? Okay. Okay, good. So look out for Virginia's letter. And then Council of Aging hasn't met, they're not going to meet again until August, but they had over 70 members attend the picnic, and they're reviewing a grant with Highland Valley and the RFP, which is up to $8,000, which is due by the end of August, and they hope to start pickleball clinic by mid-July. And thank you again to the Highway Department for your help with that. That's it.
Want me to go?
Yes.
And conservation was last night, I'm sorry, and they just reviewed the CR.
I don't have any updates from the Board of Health. PQB meets Thursday, this coming Thursday. And then from Capital Committee, we haven't met, but I spoke of this our last meeting before the election. I just want to thank the populace of Southampton for supporting the capital projects that we had on the ballot. I was pretty happy with all of those outcomes, and I'm very appreciative and thankful for that.
Francine?
Okay, Norris School Committee met on June 17th. The principal did an update. They're expecting about 505 students next year. They have 10 new school choice students coming in, and they're capping the number of classes per grade at 3 each going forward. The state budget came out, and the aid to districts, while it went up slightly, they don't anticipate any real appreciable difference. There is a program for aid to rural districts, and it was increased from 1.5 million to 2.5 million, but there's no word yet on how the money is going to be distributed and what the benefit to Norris. Norris and the Hampshire Regional school committees joined the Massachusetts Rural Schools Coalition, and along with other communities, which will establish a 501c3 organization. And with that organization, they're going to be able to participate in a Harvard University grant for up to $10 million. I don't have the details on how the money is going to be dispersed, what are going to be the benefits to each of the rural schools. But the superintendent missed the first meeting. Hopefully he'll go to the next one, and we'll have some more information to share with you. But really, we need to get on somebody's radar screen, because rural schools increasingly are being left behind. The funding is just not there to support them. So this is one way of us going out and looking for funds on our own and participating and bringing the improvements that we need through this kind of a coalition. The good news, and I saved this for last, is that the town, the school committee, and the teachers reached an agreement on a 2-year contract from September 1, 2018 to August 31st, 2020, and it calls for a 1.5% increase per year in each of those 2 years. They're not scheduled to meet again until August. That's it. And MPI, you heard from Mike tonight, that was last night. He brought everybody up to speed on master plan.
Chris?
Could I just ask a question about, Janet, what you said? So that it's a 2-year contract. Was there a reason why it was only 2 years?
Pardon?
Was there a reason why it was, I mean, it goes back to 2018.
Right.
There's a reason why it's only 2 years?
I don't know, John.
She's talking about ours.
No, I don't know
Okay.
why. I was not on the negotiating committee, and I'm not part of their executive. Maybe Virginia can answer that. It expired.
Well, I know it expired, but
I think she's asking why 2 years
why not a
versus 3
3-year
years.
contract?
Not knowing where,
Okay.
Okay.
now where we're going.
I think there was because funding, and they're hearing some rosy picture of funding in the future, and they want to kind of hedge their bets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see here. Not that it's a meeting, but I just wanted to make sure it got out there. We're having that concert in the park Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. This is the second one. The first one was very enjoyable, so wish we were going out live so people would hear it. But if anybody wants to go there, 7 o'clock, bring your lawn chairs. Finance Committee met last night. They now have 4 members, 2 new, 2 existing, and they have room for 1 more member, so if anybody's interested in that. We reviewed PCFs. Vicki, our town accountant, went over year-end transfers, which she'll go over with us. We reviewed the expenses year-to-date, and everything is going well on that side, too. So it was a fairly short meeting. Planning, we met last week. The big things were we did an A&R. Ed was there with a rep from Heritage Survey. A&R just means approval not required. They had to go show the plans, get them all approved by the planning committee, so the 5 lots go back into 1 lot. So that's all been done and signed off on. Ed has the plans. And there was a subdivision hearing for 34 Pequot Road for 9 houses. Because of that issue, if you build 10, there has to be a low income. And there was a lot of people there. There was probably 15, 18 people there from the surrounding area because they had a concern about that. And one of the things about the subdivisions is normally it requires 2 sidewalks, 1 on each side if it's a certain length, but there's an option there that you could pay a fee into a fund and only have sidewalks on 1 side, which the last few developments that I've been seeing, that's what they're doing. They're putting it into a fund, they're only putting a sidewalk on 1 side, and the cul-de-sac isn't that long, so it makes sense. Remind me, Ed, where that funding goes for the sidewalks. It doesn't go into the general fund. It
No.
stays specific to the,
Yeah, it stays specific that the town can use it in other areas to either put in or replace sidewalks.
right. So it doesn't just go into the general fund and gets lost. It stays specific to the sidewalks in other areas. The lots on Pomeroy Meadow, and I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, Rini, so if I'm duplicating, I'm sorry, but the parking area Pomeroy Meadow was done by Randall and his folks last week because they needed to get it done before the closing, which was last Friday. So they went ahead and did that, and it looks good. So thanks to Randall and his crew for doing that. Hampshire Regional High School, the negotiating committee, they agreed to a 1-year contract for the the teachers and the paras. And it's for the same reason. They feel that coming down the road, there's some potential for more funding from the state, so they want to see what's coming down the road. And so we'll take the summer off and be back negotiating in September. Their contract starts September 1 of this year, so there's no retroactive to that. And this Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m., I believe it is, Ed, Cooley Dickinson Hospital is having the open house in the Big Y Plaza for their new facility. I know I'm doing a 3 to 5 minute, I think, talk, as they said.
I thought it was a 20-minute.
No. And Francine, you said you're going to be there. Is anybody else planning on going?
Can't.
No? Okay. So I think that's all I have. Ed, would you want to segue to your report?
Sure. The town did close Friday afternoon on the 14.4 acres of property on Pomeroy Meadow Road, which were acquired for the drinking water supply protection area. The parking lot required for the grant reimbursement has been installed by the Highway Department, and the signage required by the grant will be installed tomorrow by the Water Department and Kurt Beaujolais. Just to let you know, Barbara Laflamme has sent us a very nice letter. Copy is in your packets declining a reappointment to the Open Space Review Ad Hoc Committee. She thanked the Select Board very much for the opportunity to serve in the first year of the committee's existence. An extra work order number 2 for the Glendale Road Improvement Project has been approved in the amount of $6,327.43. It's in regards to a field conflict between the existing gas main and the proposed drainage system. We will need a special meeting of the Select Board on May 15th to complete the departmental transfers for the end of the fiscal year.
July.
It was like May 15th.
Yeah, I did it again. July, yep. Transfers, the meeting will be at 5:30 p.m. and it'll be a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. We did receive our executed contract and project agreement for drinking water supply grant back from the state. That's all set. And John's already done this, a reminder that the open house for the Cooley Dickinson Urgent Care Center in the Big Y Plaza is this Thursday, June 27th from 4 to 6 p.m. with the remarks at 4:30 p.m. One other item, Francine had asked me if it was possible for Christine Foles to be appointed to the Bylaw Advisory Committee. I did some research. That committee was originally approved at 5 members, which it does currently have 5 members. However, if this board wanted to consider expanding that committee to 6, if you did consider that, I might give you a recommendation that you might look at making it a 6-member board with 5 appointees at large and making an automatic appointment of the town clerk, who is now appointed separately. It makes total sense. I've seen this in other communities where the town clerk who has to administer those bylaws is an automatic appointment. So just a little thought on that particular piece. Other than that, select board meetings July 9th and 23rd, with the special one on July 15th, and the select board meetings for August will be determined later.
And just on the July 15th meeting, we're going to have it up in the second floor conference room so that we don't have to drag ECAT in for, an hour meeting. So we'll just tape it upstairs.
Okay.
And that's it for me.
Okay.
Any questions for Ed?
I'd like to talk about the bylaws committee and the addition of Chris. Her background. I've been on the bylaws committee. Well, Virginia and I, 3 years or more. It is the task is just so almost overwhelming. We've had people come and go from the original 5. I think we're the only 2 from the original group that gathered, and so other people have, rolled in, and then you bring them up to date, and then someone else leaves and someone else comes, and it's been a revolving door. And I think, that's kind of slowed down some of the progress. Knowing Christine and her background in terms of policy development and things like that, I thought that she would be a great asset to the committee. We really do need the help. The other part of that is she's very willing to help. And so I brought it forward, not knowing what the, because there's been so much turnover on the committee, I forgot what the maximum number of participants there were. So finding out that it's 5, but I think the designation of the town clerk, which is also a resource to the group as kind of an add-on person, and leaving it at 5 at-large members, I think really resolves the issue for us if everyone else here is okay with that, and if Christine is still willing to serve.
Yeah, there's nobody saying that they're not in agreement with that.
I'll put it on the next agenda. And the one other piece of that puzzle that I might recommend you revisit is the original appointments were basically till finished. It's been going on for 3 years, so the board might consider making them actual, 3-year appointments or something like that.
Okay, why don't you put it on the agenda?
I will do that.
Okay. Yeah,
Infinite.
anybody that wants to volunteer and has the background is more than welcome, so thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, are there bylaws for the bylaws committee?
Pardon me?
Are there bylaws for the bylaws committee?
Yes, I believe, yeah. And places where there are gaps, we're trying to fill. So in addition to reviewing the existing bylaws, we're also building what we hope is a good foundation.
The reason I'm asking is I totally support you being on the committee, but I'm just not sure, is it okay for the select board to just say, we're going to go ahead and be okay with 6 members, or having the town clerk be the appointed person, and the other people, like, doesn't the bylaws committee have to take some sort of a vote?
I'd have to go back and look, and...
It's not a bylaw. It's originally set up by the select board, so I would say it's up to the select board to, if they want to revisit that and make any changes to the original charges or makeup of that committee.
So can you find the the original charge and everything?
I can find what's in the minutes. I
Okay.
won't be able to find the actual, probably written charge the way it should be.
So if you could send that to us, we'll have a better idea next week.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, old business, fiscal 19 budget and expenditures review. Has it been updated, Vicki, since our last meeting? I don't remember seeing additional.
I'm trying to remember when Joyce sent that.
I think it's through 6/20.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the last, she would send it out after the last.
Yeah, so
warrant.
I think we're all set on that.
And she'll send it out again after the payroll gets posted on Thursday.
Hampshire Regional, there's nothing new on that. East Street Bridge update. Is there anything new on that, Ed?
Yes. I actually talked to John Furman from VHB, and as the design goes on, they have reached out to Holyoke Gas and Electric, whose gas line is on the bridge, which is actually one of the expensive pieces of this project of moving that. He had some preliminary chats with them. He suggested that they contact me as far as the design and how that's going forward. I did receive a call from them yesterday. We talked about that briefly, and I'm going to get more information from them. But originally what they had talked about was taking it off, having, a temporary passage, and then putting it back on the bridge. They are currently looking at some new technology to see if they can do a horizontal boring, basically under the Manhan River, and if they can, that will substantially decrease that cost, so they're going to let me know about that.
Ed, with regard to the East Street Bridge, have we gotten in writing from the state that that grant is ours, given our progress?
No, we don't. I have a verbal from the governor's office that that will be extended, but we do not have anything in writing.
Can we get it in writing?
I will be honest with you, the last time we talked about this, we got a verbal and never got in anything writing, so when you say, can we? I don't know, to be honest with you. Right now, I'm waiting really to hear from MassWorks themselves on even a verbal that, yes, this is a done deal.
Okay, so if you can keep us updated on that, obviously that's important. We don't want to lose it.
Yeah, can you just help me a little bit with the process? Like why, I mean, a verbal is from an individual that could turn over in that department. I don't get why, if they can say yes verbally, why they can't put it in writing.
I cannot commit to anything that is outside my control. That is a state agency, so I can ask for those things, but whether they're delivered or not,
yeah,
I can't guarantee.
Yeah,
I guess.
No, I understand that, but I understand that, Ed. So I mean, I can tell you're getting frustrated with this, but at the same time, like, we kind of need some type of assurances with regard to this.
I mean, what I've done, at least where I work, is that when somebody gives me a verbal, I'll send them an email saying, just to clarify what we spoke about, and send it to that person. So at least I have something going out to that person.
Yeah.
So maybe we do that.
Well, that's what I'm waiting for, contact for somebody right from
Okay.
MassWorks.
At least that'll be something. Yeah.
Yep, that would be good.
Good idea.
Okay, joint meeting with Public Safety Complex. You have 3 members here now. What's a quorum for you? How many are on there? John's on it. John Workman's on it. So is Janet, you on it? So that's 4 of you? Okay, good. So I think what you came for is just to find out an update on the land on College Highway. Is that correct?
Nope.
No? I was at that meeting. I was sure that's what...
I know, but you asked what I was here for.
Okay,
So I want to ask you a couple of questions,
go ahead.
okay? I've been on this committee for 12 plus.
By yourself, sir?
Charlie Konecki, 146 Valley Road, Southampton. I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee at this moment.
Thank you.
Being on committees for a long time, this Public Safety Building Committee has been in existence from 10 to 12 years now, has been struggling trying to establish a newer facility for our police and fire, as our buildings that we have are woefully inadequate. We now have a new Board of Selectmen, or Select Board, excuse me. Everything's changing here, and I'm having a hard time keeping up with it. So my question is, because it is a new board, does this board still want this committee to pursue a public safety complex?
It's what the voters of Southampton want, which I believe is yes.
Well,
The committee is put together by the select board. It's not by the town meeting vote. So we basically are charged to report to you.
so let me re-ask the question. Is there anybody on the board that doesn't think we need a new fire station and a police station? Because that's I think the first question.
Yeah.
So we all need it. We all agree with that. So the answer
Okay.
is we all want to go ahead and pursue
Okay.
all the options available.
Because privately, some of the committee members on this committee are concerned that there might have been a change of direction in the town, and was wondering if there actually was. So that's why I asked the question.
I think, in having been at that meeting, I think it's because of the lag that some of the questions came up, and hopefully we can explain the lag as best as possible.
So the first question that the committee asked was basically, what's the status on the land donation that was offered a year ago to the town for 3.5 acres to build this complex? Because what's happened now in the past years, this committee has been basically just sort of stagnant, waiting to see what happens with the land issue.
So you waiting for a response?
I'm waiting for a response.
And Ed could fill in. You know, obviously, right now, our attorney's been working on getting the agreements, and our understanding is the owner of the property wants to continue the donation. The owner of the property's health has been very poor, as you know, for a while now. So our understanding is once that gets back to a level that he can go back to the table, his attorney and our attorney are going to work something out. Am I saying that
I would say that's very accurate, yes.
I can't ask you when this will happen because I know you don't know.
Right.
But if this land donation becomes available, is this select board going to be posting a special town meeting to accept the donation? Or are we going to incorporate that into the annual town meeting or something like
I
that?
have one opinion is once that becomes available, I would say do a special town meeting, but we've got, 4 other members here, so I personally wouldn't want to wait.
That's my fear. That's their fear.
What do the rest of you think?
I wouldn't want to wait either.
Don't we ordinarily have an interim meeting sometime perhaps in the fall?
Yeah.
Usually,
Incorporated?
We're talking about some other things may come up
Yes.
anyway,
Right.
so
Absolutely.
we can work that in. Yeah.
But sometimes our fall is January, so just to be aware.
In this case, I think we got some things coming up that we'd be looking at, like September
or so.
timeframe, yeah.
Another thing that was running simultaneously is Senator Humison had put together a bond bill for $1 million for the town of Southampton for design and construction of a public safety complex. None of us has moved forward with asking because of the fact that we were waiting on a land deal. But did that actually get incorporated in last year's state budget?
Yeah, I spoke to Senator Humison about this. It was incorporated as a earmark into the capital bond bill. It is still there. If we wanted to access it for this upcoming fiscal year, those pieces have already been put into place, but it could be accessed for the following fiscal year. He had looked at it. He believes it can be used for planning and design purposes rather than construction. It is $1 million. And I talked to him briefly about it. As most of you know, Senator Humison is running for the position of mayor in Westfield. If he were to get that, he would leave his senator's office as of January 1st. But I told him that, if we were to actually get that, a letter of donation in the next month or two, that I would reach out to him. I would start conversations with the state about accessing that $1 million in the capital bond bill for fiscal year 21 while Senator Humison was still in office, and might have some influence on that.
Well, you said he would leave in this January, and that fiscal year 21 doesn't start until July 1 of 20.
It wouldn't, but it would give him the opportunity to talk with the governor's office about starting the process of
You don't
incorporating
think-
that for fiscal year 21.
You don't think we can access it in fiscal 20?
I don't believe so, but
Okay.
I could be wrong.
But that may be fine, because if we end up accepting a donation of land, let's say hypothetically it's January 1, and this money becomes available July of the following year, it's going to take this committee that long to do an RFP to get any kind of an architect available to take and start the process anyways.
Now, I'm going to disagree on the time frame with the RFP, but I'm just concerned that if he goes into a different position, that we have the money, that's all. So,
Well, I understand that. I don't want to lose the money. That's the reason the question was raised, is because we see 2 trains leaving on 2 different tracks here. And it would be nice to have that $1 million, because the projected cost of the design of this facility is somewhere around $700,000. So if we had $1 million to do the design work, then we wouldn't be looking at any money coming in from the general budget for this until we actually had something tangible to present.
yeah. No, I agree 100%. Could we?
A couple things, if I can
Go
ask. This predates me, obviously, on the board, but I guess I would want to know, in terms of the donation, that whatever the donation is going to be, how much and where it is, that we've done some due diligence in terms of this is the right spot that we want, and the land itself makes sense for us to accept as a donation. I mean, I don't want to accept a blank check just because it's a blank check. If it's something that is usable, if not for the public safety complex, but for some other purpose or whatever, then I would just want to know more details, and it's just because it all predates me being on the board, so.
Yeah, you can address that.
Oh, that's easy. We have done extensive work to determine where the fire and police complex should be in relationship to the residents of the town. There is an insurance umbrella that projects out how far a building can be constructed from where the present fire station is, which is basically a half-mile radius. That tells us that as long as we stay within that footprint, nobody's fire insurances are going to change because of the building being moved a little bit. That's the focal point of why we're where we're at with this. The other thing we look at is call ratio, and what we have, if you look at where this land is all the, quote, senior type housing situations are relatively close to that. You could actually ask the fire chief, and he'll tell you that most of the calls come into that area first. If we end up now with Cooley Dickinson Hospital putting urgent care down by Big Y, this will be even betterly served to that because of the relationship of drive.
Yeah, and I guess I would just wonder if we're talking the police and fire station and whatever else, have we done any studies on the land already? I mean, isn't that also on the aquifer? Aren't we also?
That was the concern.
Questions that we have environmental.
The land itself?
The land itself that might be donated? And, I mean, how do we know that, this isn't maybe the meeting to have this, maybe you've already had this discussion, but how do we know that 3 acres or whatever is enough for what we want to build?
Because the architects that we had hired originally put together the proposals as to the fact that we needed about 3 acres, not 3.5. So this half acre is actually dovetailing it to be a little bit larger. That work has all been done. There's actually a report about these activities. This committee has done its due diligence over the years on all this. When you say study the land, I mean, that's a wide open question. Are we talking a 21 East Side evaluation or?
Environmental impact or something, I would assume has to be done on it.
What I had heard, there were concerns. Someone raised a question about the fact that it would be sited over the aquifer, and the nature of the residue coming from the fire trucks, the kind of contaminants that they deal with, would it get into the water system?
Fire department design of a building relative to that basically requires holding tanks. So any off-wash of a truck goes into a holding tank and is taken out as industrial
So then there's
waste.
no concern. Okay.
Well, there's always a concern, just like, you know, a trailer truck could roll over on Route 10 and there'd be a concern. But because, I mean, we're dealing with dinosaur buildings right now with the same.
No one's arguing that, I believe.
But the new designs for a commercial garage and all that require floor drains that have secondary containment and isolation of materials.
Then you've covered it. I mean, that was the question.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect.
Charlie, I think that this board is in favor of a public safety complex, and I know that people of Southampton are too, but I think to be fully transparent, there were a number of things that have held this up, from the fact that it's in chapter status. There were concerns about where on the site was an appropriate place to put the complex, because at one point, the Public Safety Committee literally left a combined meeting of the Select Board and went over there and decided where they had previously thought it would be actually was not a good place for it to be. So I think all we're looking for is that the process be upheld so that we have due diligence to make sure there's a feasibility study, that it's an adequate amount of land, that it's a logical place for the site, that it's going to serve the people of Southampton, and we're not going to make mistakes that are going to have to spend a lot of money to fix. So I think that's, basically where we're at. I think we're all behind this, but we just want to make sure that everything is done right. And, there were things that held this up that were legitimate, that were raised by residents of this town, and I hope we can all move forward.
I have no issue with that whatsoever. I'm trying to hold the committee together to show that there's momentum, that this is going forward.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And Chris, just maybe an FYI, if you weren't involved, we were going to do it right out here before, and there was like $1 million site development that on land like that, which is flat and.
Yeah, we're saving $1 million by not going here by the other design. We're also saving another $1 million if we get this bond money for design.
We're not technically saving it because the town didn't vote to spend it. The price tag was too high in the first place.
Well,
I know.
Yeah.
Verbiage can be tailored to whatever you'd like it to be.
It sure
the
can.
Safety
Yeah.
Complex Committee met on site there one time. I think it was a joint meeting.
Yeah.
And we walked the whole area, and it's pretty flat and drainable, and
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't dispute the idea of having a new public safety complex whatsoever. I'm not aware of all the history of what's gone into it. But the other thing in terms of the bond bill, or the Senator Hummerson's discussion about the possible $1 million, following some of the news of various other towns, because many other towns seem to be needing the public safety complex also. It's a hot issue all over the place.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Easthampton that just approved theirs. But that was only about $250,000 for design only, and the town voted to do only the design part and not the construction. And I think that the actual design work to do theirs was a whole lot less than $1 million. So if we can get $1 million, maybe, but I mean, we may not need $1 million is my point, depending on the architect and companies we choose to do the consulting to do
Well,
that.
you were saying about 700,000. The bond bill is for $1 million.
Yeah.
But we don't have to use the
Right.
whole $1 million. Now, the question would be, can we use the remaining amount for other things rather than design?
I don't know what the language of the bill is.
We'd have to see that.
See that?
What I'm trying to do is make sure that we hold on to our option to get that money.
Yep. So to answer your question, yes, we're pursuing it, and as soon as the owner is able, we're going to re-engage.
So the only thing else I ask, and because it's not broadcasted and maybe somebody will catch it, I'm hoping other people would have an interest in getting on this committee. Because this committee, if this land donation goes forward and this bond goes forward, is going to get extremely active.
Quickly.
Yes.
No, I agree.
Enough fun in the sun?
Never. Thanks for coming.
Good to see you
Appreciate your
guys.
help. Did anybody else from the Safety Complex Committee have a question, or?
You want to say anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess.
You have to go up here.
John Workman, Belanger Road. I could speak to just the facility itself and pollution concerns. I know that like Westover had some concerns, but that's because they were doing a lot of training on site with some of the foams that they use for aircraft. But we don't do training on site because that's a whole nother bit of pollution concerns. And they've just built an academy in Springfield, which we access. So it
Someone
would,
just raised it with me.
No, it's fine. No, it's a good question. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I addressed it fully for you, so. Yeah.
Good, thanks. Anyone else? No? Okay, thanks for coming.
John, could I ask a favor that we go to any other business for the water improvement project award, because Commissioner Christie's going to have to leave?
Absolutely. Where are we now? Okay, so under
pleasure,
any
Matt.
other necessary business that can't wait to July 9th regular select board meeting. Water improvement project contract amendment, is that what it says, Charlie? And Matt Christie.
Yeah, Matt
7 o'clock.
Christie,
We've had you waiting for a while, sorry.
Water Commission. So last, on June 12th, I believe, we were able to open the bids for the pump station interconnection project with Easthampton. And the good news is we got a bidder. The bad news is we only got one bidder. So we're sort of stuck with the price. It was a little bit over what we had anticipated. But in order for us to secure the SRF loan by June 30th, we have to execute the contract by June 30th.
But you found other funding to bridge the gap?
Right. The way we structured the article in town meeting in May 2017 was we would get X amount for the SRF loan, and then we had the remaining amount to go out to bond to do whatever we wanted to do for water improvements. So we're using that bonding capacity, if you will, to bridge the gap. And we're also using some of our carryover funds from this year to bridge the gap as well.
Now, the amount for the award is $1,778,373. What was the bid?
That was the bid.
That was the bid?
We anticipated about 1.7 was the cap.
Okay.
So we're $80,000 over, I guess.
Could be a lot worse.
It could be.
Okay, so you need 2 motions approved, correct, Ed?
That's correct, and you have the, in your packages.
Yep. So I'm going to, did everybody have them in their package? Okay, just to make it quick, I'm just going to read the motion. Motion 1 is to award the contract identified as DWSRF-4396 to Bay State Regional Contractors, Inc. in the amount of $1,778,373, with the award being conditional upon approval of Mass DEP SRF program. So can I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Do you want a first?
Well, I made the motion,
Okay.
just to make it go quick.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, discussion on that? Or any questions for Matt?
Can you just explain then, it's an interconnection with the Easthampton, and what does that exactly involve? So it means
You
that
want
this
the-
company is going to come in and they're going to actually physically make a connection to the pumping station that exists, to the Southampton as a backup water
We don't
supply?
have a pumping station.
Right.
When we start the contract, we're starting to make the pumping station building and connection. Right now, we have two, what I would call informal connections between Easthampton that aren't metered. And they can only serve a limited part of the town. So when we go on to Easthampton Water, we actually shut certain valves, and some of the town is supplied with Easthampton Water, and some of the town is supplied with Southampton Water. We're going to build a pump station at Big Y that's going to be able to supply the entire town with water. So we're going to make a hard connection with 3 pumps in the building that are going to be able to draw water from Easthampton and pump it into Southampton, so that we can either use it in emergency or shut down our well and repair it, which is what we plan to do as soon as the pump station's finished, or any other sort of typical use you might need for this pump station. But it's primarily for emergency purposes.
It's not going to be drawing every day.
No, we might use it. We might use it in the summer when it's high demand, which is what we've been doing with Easthampton for years now anyway. So when people are watering their lawns and enjoying the summer, our single well doesn't keep up. So we've got to borrow from Easthampton, and we essentially become another customer of theirs.
So this is going to be, you said Big Y?
Right. If you're standing in front of Tractor Supply, there's that hedgerow of arborvitaes. It's going to be on the north side of that, so between the church and Tractor Supply, sort of tucked back in there.
And who owns that land?
We do now. We have a
was part
permanent
of
easement there. That was, I forget when we closed on that, maybe a year ago or so.
Remember that.
Yeah.
So the note about contingent upon DEP approval, we've gotten assurances from DEP that they're going to sort of fast track this week and approve it. But if for some reason they don't, and we execute the contract, then it's not valid, right? Because DEP hasn't approved the contract.
Yeah, and we're not on the hook for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's conditional upon the Mass DEP.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
On the revised cost summary, the contingencies and the cost here says 2.1.
Right. So the base bid is the 1.77.
Right, I see that.
And then DEP makes you add all these different contingencies in for that reason alone, in case something comes up and there's
So it's likely that it could go as high.
if that's the gap we're bridging.
Oh, thank you.
So we're not bridging just this 80,000 or so. We're bridging from the 1.7 to the number that's at the bottom there, 2.1, I believe, somewhere.
And that's using your bonding capacity.
Right, partially this year's remaining funds, and then the rest are the bond.
Any more questions for Matt on the first motion?
Just the bond in this case would be for how long on this one?
What do we do? Vicky's guiding us through that one.
Well, so is Jen, no. Vicki Morrow, Pomeroy Meadow Road, Town Accountant. The bonding is part of a bigger entity of monies with the water and all their projects. So you can't borrow any more than the useful life of any particular fixed asset, so to speak. So I would think 20 years, 25 years, but it all depends on what other projects are rolled into that big bond that they get for everything else. But the article allowed us to get $1,030,000 if we were to get the 1.7 from the SRF. So we have that leeway to pay for the I think it's like $450 some odd thousand. So.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? You want to read the next one because it concerns me?
To authorize the chair of the select board to sign a formal agreement with the contractor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on that? Just allowing me to sign the agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I want to thank the board for their work and for expediting this item.
Appreciate your
Certainly
work.
appreciate it.
Say thanks to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, going back here. Okay, next, board to reorganize officers. We do this once a year, usually in May. And just let me add a little chuckle to this because whoever gets the chair has to do that talk at Cooley Dickinson on Thursday. Okay, so who wants to nominate someone to take over as chair for the next year?
Okay. Can I just say something? Charlie was right when he said this is, comparatively speaking, it's a relatively new board. There are 3 of us here that are less than 2 years and some less than a year. And looking at succession and so forth, and just looking at cycling, would we want to consider having people like have a year as vice chair, move into chair, and then kind of continue to rotate forward so that we have some plan in place. I know you and Reni's terms will end next year, and if for some reason you don't, either one of you don't choose, you have the most seniority, and then there are the 3 of us here with not much experience. And I think that someone in place as a vice chair who's, and I'm suggesting one of the 3 of us, just simply to kind of learn the ropes so that in the event that something like that would happen. And I don't know if anybody else thinks that way, but I always worry about who's going to be next.
Yeah.
And
Makes sense?
Yep, makes sense.
so we're thinking about it in that way.
So what do you want to put in the form of a motion here? I mean, the plan sounds good. I don't think any of us disagree. But we need a motion for a chair, and then we have to go to vice chair, and then we have to go to clerk.
Sure. Okay. I would like to move then to nominate Rini Groden as chair.
Okay, we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion, you okay with that?
If that's what the board votes. You okay with it?
It's what you want.
You all right?
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? You got it. So you're going to have to take over for the vice chair and the clerk nominations.
Okay, I was going to suggest maybe it start with the new fiscal year since we're already mostly through this meeting, but if you think otherwise, I'm happy to
It's
assume
up
it.
to you. If you want me
Yeah,
to
I
finish the
think that
meeting, I will. If you want to...
I think we've already signed a number of things that put you down as chair, so I'm fine with it just being with the new fiscal year as in next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. So in that case, let's go to vice chair. We need a motion for somebody for the vice chair.
Nominate Matt, oh, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
Matt Rowland for vice chair.
Okay,
I'd second that.
any discussion? You okay with that?
Okay with that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Who seconded that?
No, I didn't.
Chris, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. Now for clerk.
I'll nominate Francine again if she's willing.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that too.
You okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're there.
Good.
And now we've got to go to assign liaisons to boards and committees and elect voting members to the PQB and the Capital Committee for the upcoming year. Okay, so, boy, do we have a list of committees, Ed?
You had it in the packet.
Is it in there?
Is it in the packet?
Yeah.
So I'll just say this in case it matters to people. I'm willing to, I like being on the Capital Committee. I enjoy it. It's also what, frankly, I do for a living, too. So I'm happy to stay on that if the board so wishes. I'm also happy to stay on PQB as well.
Can I just add a little of my perspective to this again?
Yeah.
I think about these things. I think about what committees really have kind of cross lines and have more in common. For instance, I think assessors, planning, and zoning might make a nice unit, as would capital and finance. So what I'm thinking here is that as we decide our liaison assignments, wouldn't we want to have the same liaison to those kind of related committees be one and the same person? I mean, this year I was with Norris School and the regional and the high school. So that kept education under one. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. I just keep looking at it from the master plan committee's perspective. I mean, we look at this document and it's so fragmented. And so I'm just kind of looking at ways in which we can coordinate and best use people's time and their skills. So it doesn't matter to me, but I'm throwing it out there.
I was going to say time is an important one, because obviously some of these take more time than others. And also, maybe what your skill and background is if you're lending something to the particular committee.
Right, yeah.
I think those are important, too.
I think in theory, the idea of clustering like committees makes sense, but not totally sure the time involvement of each of them. I assume some take a lot more time than others, and I do think you might have to, in general, go with that idea, but make exceptions, especially depending on somebody's skill level.
I think there are 3 or 4 of them that actually meet every other week, and I know conservation has been a big and good learning curve for me, but it's a frequent meeting. So is planning, so is assessors. So I know if I had I think I'm on 4 committees and really try hard to go to them. If I had too many that were every other week, it would be a challenge.
Yeah, that's a concern of mine, too.
So we might want to divide those ones up for sure.
And I guess one other thought I had is I wasn't sure, given all the committees in town, I think we started talking about it maybe last meeting, do we have every committee listed that we think is important to have a liaison?
I think we
Or
have
are
too
there
many.
others that we need to think about that maybe haven't had a liaison?
Especially, I think at the beginning, when Bruce was on the board, we had liaisons to department heads. But with Ed fully here as director, it just didn't make sense to continue to have select board liaisons to someone that reported to him.
Right.
So then we kind of looked at the list again, and we, I think, made a pretty good list. Like, we don't have anybody to park, and some other ones that just seemed like they met less often or weren't as involved as like planning. So I don't know, we can relook at the list. Because it does feel like there are a lot of meetings.
Yeah, some weeks we can have 4 or 5 meetings in a bad week, and which is tough.
Right.
But there's some of these. I mean, for instance, Board of Health. To me, Rini has a background. So to me, Board of Health, that makes sense because you understand all that. We're Council on Aging, except for Matt, we can all relate to it, so it doesn't matter.
Actually, I have enjoyed being on the Council of Aging, because remember how difficult things were a few years ago, so I'm actually quite happy that they've done a lot of work, and I think they're in a good place.
Okay, so I want to start something off. The Open Space Review Ad Hoc Committee. I know Rini and I talked about this. Two of us on there has been too many.
Yeah,
and I
agree.
And I think Rini is the best one to stay on that one personally. So, I mean, I would be fine if you want to stay on that one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And just so you know, I didn't mention this when we had our updates. We did talk about it being ad hoc versus standing, and the short-term goal was working towards Glendale, and the long-term goal was working on priority mapping. And then I think we can decide whether the committee wants to continue, or whether or not It would just be ad hoc. So I think we decided to just put that down the road a little bit and wait till master plan gets a little bit further on to decide where the intersection will be between master plan, conservation, and open space.
Yep. And I think we originally talked about that and said, let's wait until we had Glendale done and see Pomeroy Meadow done. So we're approaching that.
I think one issue with the Board of Health, and I agree, I used to be on the Board of Health, but one issue with that is that they often meet the same time as the select boards, so it makes it difficult for anybody to really be a liaison there.
But it's an important committee.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the issue. Okay. So we have advanced not too far on this. So let's just go down the list. The assessors, Jim was on the assessors. Does somebody have an interest where they would like to be on that one? Okay. So
How often
let's,
does it meet?
Every other week.
yeah.
That's one of the every 2-week ones. And so is planning, and so is conservation, from what I could tell.
And so is master plan.
Okay.
Okay, so let's leave that open for a second. Board of Health, you're on that, Matt. Does somebody else want to be on that? Matt, you want to stay on that?
Does anybody else want us to pick it up? Do you want to pick it up?
I mean, if we could just go down and see it, because I would like to be in the Council of Aging.
Yeah.
So if we could just
I'm just trying to.
wait on that
That's
one.
not one that I
Yeah.
particularly want.
Can we just wait on that one, and then we'll come back to that one, if nobody else here is
So
interested?
Council of Aging, anybody
Oh,
have an
yeah.
issue with Rini being on that?
Council on Aging.
Huh?
Council on Aging, it's not.
I know, thank you. They say that all the
I say
time.
of?
On Aging, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, but they say that all the time.
Thank you for pointing out my error. Concom, right now,
It's me.
we have Rini.
Does anybody have a strong interest in being on Com?
I would not mind being on it if you want
Okay.
to move away, but if you want to stay on it with the open space, that's fine too. So.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think I have been on community preservation, open space, and Concom, but if I don't have a problem with, I'd like to stay on COA, and I can't have all of them, so if you're interested in that, I think that'd be great.
So Chris on Concom? Okay.
Okay.
FinCom, I'm on, and I wouldn't mind staying on that one.
I think you're good for that one.
So we're okay?
Since you were chair for so many years.
And Francine was on it also.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but she allowed me to take it over. I remember that. Greenway Committee I'm not on the Greenway Committee. I was on the Greenway Negotiating Committee.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to have a rep on
Yeah,
the
I don't
Greenway
think so.
Committee. MPI, Master Plan,
We have 2 members on that now.
do we?
Well, I'm at large, so I'm not technically, I mean, I'm not.
So you got voted on, Chris?
I'm an at-large appointee,
was
yeah.
appointed.
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 Yeah.
Okay, you were appointed.
Yeah.
Before the liaison.
Yeah, at large. Right, so I'm not as a select
Okay,
board
so-
member. Right. So Francine is the,
So Francine, do you want to stay as a select board, or
Sure.
it's up to you, or do you think,
I mean, whether or not, 2 of us need to be on it,
well, the same thing happened when Jim and I were on planning.
Right.
And the thing is, you come from a different perspective, I think.
no, I'm happy to stay on it. And
So let's pencil you in.
with how it's going.
Let's pencil you in for now, and we can always revisit,
You're
right?
the one that actually got it back going again, Francine.
Yeah. So Norris. Francine, you're on that now, as well as Hampshire Regional. Does somebody,
I do that now?
you want to give one of those away, Francine, or does somebody have an
Well, if
interest?
someone else wants it, I'll be fine giving it up. But again, I would suggest we do both.
together.
Well, maybe not.
That's a lot of work.
Everybody has a different perspective, so
Perspective,
maybe it's better to have 2 different people.
Okay. Well, Matt said he would do Norris.
I'd be in, when does Norris meet?
Wednesdays, once a month.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be interested in Norris, but,
Okay.
Okay.
given my work, there's no way I could do both.
Okay. Francine, do you have an interest with staying with Hampshire Regional, or? Too late.
I'm not
We got your pencil in.
That's fine. No, I don't want to, I think Francine's done an excellent job with
Yep.
them. So I don't want to take them from you if that's something that you want to keep. And also,
Regional?
both of them. I mean, I feel like there's value in keeping them together too. So I don't want to be the one that splits them up, especially if you'd like to maintain them.
That would work. I mean, I'm okay with that.
With what? Splitting them up or keeping them together? Or keeping them?
No, if you're interested, that's fine with me, in keeping, having them both together.
I know that can I just say that when I was at Hampshire Regional School Committee and my kids were there, I learned a lot about a lot of things. So it might be, you have a son there, right?
Yeah.
It might be nice for you to have the parent perspective that you bring to the committee, because a lot of times it's nice to have that.
Yeah.
But it's up to you.
So, do we want to do Matt on Norris and Francine on Hampshire? You both okay with that?
What do you think, Francine?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
You good? Okay. So, open space, we have Rini.
Yep.
Planning, I'm on that, and I would be fine with keeping that. Okay. Public safety, I'm on that also, and I'm fine with that. That's more where my background comes in the construction. ZBA, we don't have anybody on ZBA.
Do we need to?
Don't know.
Seems to me that goes tighter with planning board, doesn't it? I mean,
No, zoning board of appeals, I mean, it could. You want,
On that.
nobody's on that, so. I mean, I can pencil myself in and see if they need somebody there.
I mean, it kind of seems like it's an important committee to have somebody on there from the select board, no? I mean,
Yeah.
if you've got something that somebody comes forward with that's gone through the planning board and or you've got certain bylaws in town that you're trying to adhere to, right? And I don't know, somebody comes forth and wants to do something different, and you just go to the zoning board and nobody's there to say, hey, wait a minute.
Well, the planning committee would reject, and then they'd have to go to the ZBA, right? That's the right process?
Is that what works?
Process.
Yeah.
No, there are different things. Usually what's being driven to the ZBA is the building commissioner rejects something.
Okay.
So
Okay. So get
it's
there
probably
that
the
way.
more common way of that going.
So the building inspector rather than the planning. Okay.
Where you've got,
Okay, so I'm going to leave ZBA just open there for a second. Now, select board designated offices with voter rights by their bylaws. So we've got community preservation.
no.
Yeah, I was on that.
That's Rini,
I was on that before.
Okay, so
has been, yeah. She's got a-
what do you folks think? Is this something you want to stay on, or you want somebody else to take a
Just
read?
want to see if anybody else had an interest in doing it. I'm fine to stay on it, but I didn't know if anybody else was interested.
If you're in conservation, community preservation.
I wouldn't mind if
Yeah.
it ties with conservation, that would give me, if that's okay with you, I mean.
Yep.
All right.
So,
Chris, community preservation.
okay. PQB.
Excuse me just a minute, that's a voting member for community preservation.
Right.
Yep.
So they have to go before you, and they have to get voted in by the CPC?
No,
No?
but she will have to be sworn in. for
Sworn in
that.
by,
Be sworn
Yeah,
sworn in.
okay, by the clerk? Okay.
or at.
Okay.
So she has to go before the clerk to get sworn in?
To keep together.
Okay, PQB, Matt, you're on that now?
Mm-hmm.
You want to stay on that? You only have one assignment up above.
I'm fine with staying on that.
And Capital Committee, you're on that one too.
I do like that one, but if somebody, I would like to stay on that, but
Anybody have any issue with that?
Nope.
So finance and capital is together, is that what
No,
you're saying?
PQB and Capital, he's on, and he's on the Norris. Let's see, Chris, we got you on CPA, or the CPC, and also on Concom.
Okay.
How would you like the assessors?
Oh, well, I guess I could learn some things.
We can always learn, right?
Sure.
And the Board of Health now.
I
I
thought
only
that was
have
Matt.
2, so I can
Or
take
that
that.
was, no?
Matt's going to keep that?
Yes.
No, okay.
no.
I have
That's-
2, so I can do that.
Did he say yes or no?
He said, no.
Which one,
All right,
Francine?
Board of
then
Health.
I would do the Board of Health.
You will, Francine? Okay.
No, I mean, if Rainey...
She volunteered, you volunteered,
Oh,
so.
no, Rainey is better, if I didn't hear...
I mean, if,
She's better qualified for that.
Okay, Randy.
okay.
So let's just recap. Chris has assessors, Concom, and the CPC, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Rainey has Board of Health, Open Space.
Council of Aging.
Where did I miss that? Okay. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Board of Health, Council on Aging, and Open Space. I have FinCom, Planning, and Public Safety. Matt has Norris, PQB, and Capital. And I'm going to check out the ZBA, see if that's something we need to have a rep
What
on.
does Francine have?
Did I not say Francine? I'm sorry.
Well, what does Francine have?
MPI, Hampshire Regional. Oh, you only got 2, Francine. Is that it?
I just want to finalize this discussion. Given that you just did Hampshire and Norris, do you see any risk to us splitting those up?
No,
Like, is there any problem with that based on you going the last year to put that together?
I was on Norris before that, and we didn't even have a liaison. Actually, all 4 of us were sharing Hampshire Regional. That didn't work. So I don't think it's, I don't think it
I
matters.
just want to make sure we're not making a mistake by doing that.
and, you know, it kind of, you know, from my perspective, of not having any kids in school, it gave me a 360.
Yeah.
But it would be very different, so.
Do you want to do the ZBA then? I'll give you 3 on there.
All right.
Okay, let's put
I'm not
Francine
even stuck.
on
Can
ZBA.
I ask, Francine, didn't you express an interest in the public safety? Weren't you assigned to the public safety?
On the original, yes,
Yeah.
not the original, but when they went and did the site visit, yes, I did. John, I mean, that leaves you with finance, Greenway,
I don't know, Greenway's not a committee.
All
The
right,
thing about
Green-
public safety is,
okay, public
I'm-
safety,
I'm well-versed in the
okay, planning.
Chapter 149 laws of the
Okay.
Commonwealth, and that's going to
Right.
play heavy
Then-
into that.
Then I'm okay with ZBA.
Okay.
Have we not had finance and capital investment together this year? Isn't that?
No, they don't really,
Don't have to be?
yeah. Capital Committee is just looking at the 5-year plan on what is needed,
Okay.
and then they recommend, and then we've got to find financing for it. Did I state that right, Matt?
Yes.
Are there any other committees that we neglected to include, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
I'm looking at the list. I mean,
You have one,
I don't see
two,
anything that's,
three. I have one.
we talked about bylaw review? Or is that, no?
No,
That's
that's
fine. I'm
a-
just going down the list here.
Yeah, the bylaw, no, it's been the bylaw committee, right? I mean, technically, from,
Master
You
plan.
want-
I'm on bylaws. I was appointed to bylaws for a long time ago, so
So that's on here. Bylaw Review Committee.
so I wouldn't,
I mean, that was really the only one that we didn't. That's fine.
Okay, so let's put Francine down for that.
And master plan, did we talk about that?
Yeah.
Francine's on that.
Yeah, she's on that. If you end up not wanting to do ZBA, just let me know, we'll figure it out.
I don't think they need that.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so either.
they don't, yeah,
So we can talk about it.
yeah.
Any other committee anybody can think of that we need to be on? I think if we've got like 3 or so each, that'll keep us busy.
Out of trouble.
Well, I don't know about that, but,
there's a month, Mondays.
okay, let's see where we are here. Approval of financial investment policy.
And Jen Day has sent this along. It was one of the auditor's comments, so this has been developed and recommended in response to that.
I'll make a motion to approve the financial investment policy.
Did everybody have a chance to read it? Okay, so we have a second? We need a second.
A second.
Okay, any discussion on it? Any
Yes.
questions?
I did have, go ahead.
I would. Can anybody tell, I mean, has nothing to do with the policy, this is more information. How much money do we have invested? And can we start getting quarterly reports at these meetings so that we understand?
Those are two things we could find out. Ed, is that something you could get us for the next meeting?
What's that again, please?
I'm asking about how much we have invested, and could we get a quarterly report on those investments?
Vicki, you want to?
Well, Vicki Morrow, Pomeroy Meadow Road Town Accountant. So some of those things that are invested are right in your expense pages, which are the stabilization accounts.
Right.
So those are, if you look at the last page, which is your expendable trust funds, that's, except for the stabilization accounts and the OPEB liability, which are all invested, the rest are the interest that we gain from those investments. The regular investments don't ever change, which is on my balance sheet, which I can give to you, but they don't change because this is where the interest goes. You can spend the interest. And then the other piece would be like I said, the non-expendable
Right.
trust funds, which it pretty much stays. So, I mean, this kind of gives you an idea of what the town has, so to speak, so.
Is that sufficient to what you're looking for?
I mean, so what happens at the end of the year is I give Jen all the transfers within the stabilization accounts, and she will make those transfers in the trust funds themselves, Bartholomew Trust, and then we balance to make sure that those funds have whatever we have that was spent out of them or whatever interest that we gain every month from those. So, I mean, we can put it in a different format if you want, but most of that's kind of already sort of here.
That would make sense to me, to have
Okay.
it kind of all together. And I guess what caused me, to raise the question is when I see words, and I know this is a document, unlimited amounts, coverage limits. I'd like to know more rather than less.
Yeah, and
That's
actually under E, reporting requirements, on a quarterly basis, a report containing the following information will be prepared by the treasurer and distributed to the select board as appropriate. Quarterly report will include the following information as a minimum requirement, and that's on the page right before the signing page.
Okay.
I think the reason it says unlimited amounts is because there are certain statutes the DOR puts on limitations in order to, you can only have a certain percentage of equalized value in your stabilization account, which most communities will never get to because we have $725 million in equalized value. You know what I mean? So those types of things, like the school can only have so much in their free cash, otherwise they have to give it back to the communities. So I think that document is telling you can invest as much money pretty much as you want. There's no limits. So.
Vicki, while you're still there, can I ask you a question? On this thing, and I can't find where I was reading it yesterday, there was some piece where it said that if there was money that was donated or to the town, or there was some benefactor, then, and they had restrictions on how the money was invested, that we had to honor those restrictions. So if somebody said, I don't want any investment in fossil fuels, that sort of thing, we would be obligated, regardless of the amount, or however, this would restrict that?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it says it right there, yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, under B, second paragraph. Trust fund results from a gift, grant, whatever, and the private donor specifies how the trust shall be invested. Trust fund shall be invested in accordance with the terms of the gift, grant, or bequest.
Okay.
That works the same in terms of when they bequeath something to us, they want it spent in a certain way, or that you can only spend certain things out of it. It's, that would apply to that also.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And who made that motion, please?
I did.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen.
Okay, approval of fiscal 20 non-union wage rates. Okay, Ed, is that?
That's it'll be separate in there because it was a large sheet, so it couldn't be scanned with an S on.
So it's in the paper?
It's this one.
It's in the Dropbox too, separate, should be separately.
It doesn't have any notation on it, so that's why I don't see it. Thanks. Okay. Okay, Matt, Rainey, you can sign that, that's investment policy? Yep. Okay, Ed, give us a quick update on this. So, this is all the current...
This is all the current non-union members, and the treasurer has calculated what the 2%, thank you, 2% increase would be for fiscal year 20 wage rates or salaries.
Okay, so this is just adding the 2% to the non-union staff, right?
Correct.
Is there any outliers here, or is it truly all 2%, Vicki?
It's all 2%.
Okay, and it's all within the budget? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the non-union raises
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
for FY 2020.
Okay, according to the spreadsheet here. You want us to physically sign off on this, Ed?
Yeah, if the chair would just sign that sheet, we know, then the auditors will know.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous?
Thank you.
Okay.
John, the next item is about the departmental transfers. Could I think I emailed you today about, could I bring up something from last meeting? I wasn't here, but I just want to have a question while Vicki's here.
Oh, sure. Vicki, you're up next on departmental transfers, so.
Vicki, last meeting, the select board approved the use of funds from the health agent's salary and the assistant administrator's salary for the $5,000 or something for the health director?
Board of Health Director, right.
Yep.
In the town meeting warrant from this year, Article 23 specifically says, funding for the health director to see if the town would vote to transfer $5,000 from unemployment expense account to the health director wage account to fund the position through the remainder of the year or take any other relative action thereto. Are we obligated, since the town voted to approve additional money for this position, to actually take the money from that account as opposed to the one that was voted on last meeting?
They're two separate items.
They are.
Yeah. So that was funded to fund the position till the end of the year, and this was put on to cover the increase from February until June.
Yeah, and there was another article, wasn't there, that got
Yeah, that got-
The $10,000 one, correct.
rejected, yeah. So this
Yeah, from
is,
free cash.
yeah, this is because of the reevaluation based on the law that Ed did.
Okay.
Wait, explain to me these two buckets, because we voted on a town meeting to do the delta.
And there was two.
No, you voted on $5,000 to fund her till the end of the year. There was nothing in that motion that said at what rate or anything.
Why wouldn't she have been funded to the end of the year?
This is to cover the increase at that 87%, right.
I understand that, but the budget funds are for a full fiscal year, so I don't get why she wouldn't have been funded. That's really
He's
what my
asking about the
question was.
$5,000.
There was two articles to fund the position.
Yeah.
One of them failed.
Yep.
Okay, so this transfer fills in, so it would fund the higher rate through June 30th.
It's making up the balance of the two.
Because the article failed?
Correct.
Because the article failed, and we had to upgrade the salary based on the reevaluation. So we're just supplementing what was approved at the town meeting in order to do this. And it's only for this fiscal year, because for next fiscal year, we level funded the budget, and they need to go from there.
Are we not circumventing what the voters decided?
Well, we're doing what we feel is legally obligated to do.
And one of the pieces that came out, and one of the reasons that finance was against that one that failed, was the fact that it was coming from free cash and not within the regular budget like the article that passed did. So we're going back to funding that through.
Within the same budget.
Through the
With
same
operational stabilization.
Yeah.
And I guess it's less an issue of whether we think the salary is appropriate or not, as rather more than legally, we've got to fund it, because that was the reevaluation that was done. What was the name of the law?
The Pay Equity Act.
Pay Equity Act, yeah.
How does this not flow into next year?
Well, next year, we level funded the budget.
The rate flows, but obviously hours would be
So
different.
they have to decide how they want to manage that department and what kind of staffing and hours and all that.
Okay, good.
Again, and we can't pay her that rate until the Board of Health gives me a PCF that says she can get paid that rate.
Yeah.
Because they are her appointing authority.
So the
And I
money's-
can't pay that. So it's there, but until they say, hey, here's a
The
PCF.
thing that kind of
So-
concerned me is we're signing off on this before even the Board of Health does and the Finance Committee, so
I was asked to put that transfer on this and bring it to you guys, and so that's what I did.
I wasn't here, I won't quarterback it.
Yeah,
It
no, I'm just
seems-
saying that's what Ed had asked me to put this on here, and so that's what I brought to your guys' attention.
Finance Committee approved it last night.
They
Yeah.
did.
Or Monday night, yeah, last night.
That was last night, yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes you seem like
You can tell
we're
where
here
my mind
forever, right?
is. Really.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's, and so if it comes to pass that it's still there at the end of the year,
Just flows back in.
and rolls back in or gets transferred someplace else, that might need that money.
The Board of Health is aware of it, you said, so
Yes, they know.
we've done our end. Okay, open space review ad hoc committee discussion.
Oh, we
Do you
still have
want to do these other ones?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. We got you up
I know
there.
you heard them last night, but they're not that difficult.
I can repeat them, yes.
Okay, go ahead. No. So these are kind of minimal, basically some cleanup stuff, and there will be one last one on July 15th, because I still have the outlier of highway winter road expenses, and there's kind of a big chunk of money in there that I didn't necessarily want to take from a department until I had all their bills in at that point in time. So that will be on the last one that we do on July 15th. So currently on here there is police overtime wages. Ian and I had discussed that he was going to need more money in his overtime wages, which will come from his police wages, because he has an officer that is currently in the academy, and so we have to fill those shifts, and this will cover him through the end of the year. Building inspector expenses. I have a warrant upstairs for $625. That he submitted today. Part of that is his $240 for his monthly mileage stipend, and part of that is money for stipend for traveling for seminars and conferences. He does a lot of training. This one was a particular big one because it was in the eastern part of the state. And then there is some uniform expenses on there that they are required to now get. And so that will come out of his building inspector alternate. He hasn't used his alternate very often because he works those extra hours in order to cover those before he goes on vacation or training or whatnot, I believe. And then there's money that we put in the budget every year for gas and plumbing expenses. that we didn't use all this year. That is a variable also every year. They do need to belong to certain organizations, if you will, like the building inspector or the police, like the fire chief and the police chief belong to their particular organizations, but they also have to do recertifications, and those, if they're not this year, then they're next year. But we don't know when they're going to offer those in order to pay for those, but we didn't do them this year, so that's why we have that money in there to put towards the building inspector expenses. The next couple are interest for loans from the water department. Those are minimal amounts where every year we have to pay an administrative cost for those particular loans. And every year it's a little different. We budget what we did last year, but those administrative costs that we have for those particular loans come in at variable amounts. And so we're just covering those with other budget line items within the water department. We over budgeted water line number 3 interest, and we well, we didn't over budget, but we had put in water debt anticipated in case we had to borrow money for any projects that came up, but those didn't come to fruition this year. One would be, the pumping station project. We didn't know if we'd have to shell out some money ahead of time, so they were proactive in putting money in their budget in case they had to pay for those, and that, we didn't use all that money up. And then the last one would be library book expense. Barbara spent a little over, but that's going to come from her library maintenance, which she has sufficient funds to cover that. As you know, in order to keep our accreditation, we have to spend so much in books. This isn't a lot of money, but it just helps us get a little bit over that accreditation expenditure for books than in previous years. So and that's what I have right now.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget transfers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Any more questions for Vicki while we have her? Okay.
I am out for the next 2 days, just FYI, in case we need something.
I'm going to take the liberty of skipping down to any other necessary business that cannot await the July 9th regular meeting, because it kind of ties into the budget transfers at the Finance Committee meeting last night. It brought up a couple what I consider issues. I want to get your approval to have Ed do some policy work. It seems that we don't have a policy to approve travel up front. For instance, somebody could go to meetings or go to training, and they don't need to go to Ed if they're a department head to get approval up front. They just submit their expenses afterwards. And speaking with Vicki, sometimes the folks use their personal email or personal credit cards, which is definitely not something we want to do. So I'd like to have Ed develop a policy so that any department head would have to go to him either with a form or an email and get travel approved up front and the cost up front, and have them show that they have it in their budget rather than just after the fact say, here's the bill.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Some of the training comes up immediately.
I know it, but it...
Like on Monday, you find out about training on Wednesday, and so you go to the training before, and so you go to the training and you end up paying mileage. Some of them are free, some of them are 10, 20. The ones that are more expensive comes through our office, where they fill out the form, the registration, we send out a check, because we want to be able to keep track of that. We don't want people to pay out of their own personal pocket. The personal email thing I have a hard time with, because if you're doing business for the town, you should be using a town email. And so we've told people next fiscal year, we are not giving you any reimbursements at all if you're using a personal email. That's just not happening, because we can't do it. I mean, that's a big...
It's a conflict.
That's a conflict. It's a potential fraud risk for the town. I mean, not that anyone's taking advantage of it, but I don't know. It's just kind of convoluted that way.
Maybe example of how that would be use someone who would register for a conference?
They would register for a conference using their home email.
Okay, all right.
And then they would bring us the receipt, or if they paid for it by themselves,
Yeah,
they would bring it to us to reimburse. And so we have denied a few of those because
But who's denying them?
I am.
Right, and the folks report to Ed. And so you could,
But I'm denying them because that's a fraudulent payment. Like, I have the authority to do that.
right, but
Yeah.
that's after the fact. I mean, I still think we need a policy for pre-approval. If it's 2 days down the road, well, so be it. Ed's here, get approval. I mean, I know none of my staff is going to training and spending any money, budget money without coming to me first. I mean, now anybody can go to anybody, so I think we should have a policy developed so that there's a process in place to get approval from your town administrator. You all agree? Okay, so Ed, could you work on that? I don't know how long it'll take. Okay, and I've got one other one. Policy to take time off, vacation. Again, Ed's not approving this up front, so somebody could be gone. Somebody could tell him, I'm gone next week, today. And so there's no coverage, he's not aware of it. So I think we need a policy on how to ask for vacation time off.
Nothing in the personnel policies?
I'm not aware that it
I
is.
think there is.
Is there something in there?
Do you know from PQB?
I think,
Matt?
other than they're supposed to request it like 2 weeks ahead of time, I don't think there's a formal process for requesting.
And there should be a form, electronic form ideally, but right now people are just taking time off. And one of the other things that came up, and which I was surprised with, is sometimes people who are on vacation do work from vacation, and so when they put their time in, say if they're off for a week, they may put 2 days of vacation and 3 days of work. To me, that's not acceptable.
Well, not
You
without
know,
pre-approval.
Especially without pre-approval. So I think that should be part of the policy to take time off. Because if people are working from vacation, that means their vacation gets extended for a longer period. So,
There was a policy back in 2011 that the select board, and you might want to revisit that, there's no working from home. Like, they did that policy in 2011, that there was no working from home, so it's still in effect,
it's
so.
not being enforced and there's no process.
No, I mean, yeah, you take something on to home because you work on it, but you're not working from home, so to speak. But people are, like you said, doing that other.
Yeah, and that's just a way to add to your vacation time. So if you're okay with that, Ed will develop that policy too?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's see if there's... Okay. So back on track here. Open Space Review Ad Hoc Committee, I think we agreed before, just put that on hold and for a little while longer?
Yeah, we'll come back to it.
Okay. Vacation carryover requests, we have 3. First one is from Vicky. And do we have something in here from you, Vicky?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Carryover vacation, requesting a week, 4 days, from fiscal 19 to 20. As per my employee contracts, the state, I may carry up to 1 week, which is 4 days, with the approval of the select board. With the nature of this position, there are times when I'm required to work above and beyond the regular hours within a week or month, as there are required deadlines that I need to adhere to. This at times limits the amount of vacation I can take. With many projects town is taking on, the nature of those financial deadlines, days to take were limited. I did not take time when those items were due. Hope you will consider carrying over the small amount of time. So, anybody have any questions for Vicky on that?
My only question is, are you encumbering money from this year's salaries to cover the cost of the vacation in the next fiscal year, or is it going to hit next fiscal year budget an extra week of salary?
It wouldn't hit an extra week.
No.
She's just
Well,
not
I
here.
mean, but I mean, you're going to,
I
Yeah.
still get paid the same amount of money.
so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no effect to the budget.
No, it's not like an hourly, like if you took
Okay.
an extra week, they would get paid that extra.
All right, so it doesn't matter.
And my understanding is that it's part of the contract anyway, so we're approving it, but it's in your contract that it's something that's allowed?
If we approve it, yes.
And is there a amount that you're allowed to carry over?
Yep,
Yeah,
1 week.
Just 1 week?
is 4 days.
And is there a particular period of time that you're supposed to be using it by?
Does not say that, no.
But you're only allowed 1 week carryover, so theoretically, within the year, right?
Yeah. How many weeks do you get?
I have a total of 25 days. in my
Okay,
bucket.
so you can only carry over 4 more than that. Yeah. So it's kind of self-defeating every year if she doesn't take them. Okay. So can we have a motion to accept the carryover?
I'll move.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Who made the motion?
Francine?
I did.
And Matt, second?
I got the second. I missed the first.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Tom Quinlan, there's a letter in there. He's requesting to carry over 35 hours of vacation time to next fiscal year. For the majority of 19 fiscal year, I worked over my 35 hours. However, I was only paid for 35, been employed by the town 5 years, never used a day of sick time nor personal in those 5 years. Workload required for my position with inspections and zoning has increased considerably from year to year. This workload can be accounted for in the increase in revenue as the increase in permits issued this year. Fully understand in the future I need to use this time.
I have a question, I guess, on this. Certainly in places where I've worked, you had to request your vacation time, or if you were going to not use your leave time, you had to request that extension by a certain date, and certainly not 3 days or 4 days before the end of the fiscal year when it was going to expire anyway.
Yep.
So I guess I'm concerned, do we not have anything in place that says somebody has to request the potential for extension of, or carryover for their leave by
We do have it.
June 1st or something?
No, not by a date. There's no date that I'm aware of. But they have to request it in writing. I think what they do is they wait towards the end to see if they could take the time off, and if you can't, then they request the,
Now, you assume that we approve automatically that it's going to be carried over.
not necessarily.
I think we know.
Yeah, in this particular case, Tom is a non-contract employee, so it's actually going to require the approval of both the Select Board and the PPPB.
And in the past, I believe, early on, we didn't approve some carryover time, if I remember
Last year we
correctly.
did.
Last year we did, but I think,
And last year, I just re-listened to the meeting from last year,
Yeah.
and it specifically says that he'd had an increase in hours, that as of March, he didn't have a substitute person, and so we approved it with the understanding that it wasn't going to happen again.
I mean, all this points to the fact that we need some HR help.
Yeah.
The PQB manual also said extreme circumstances, like that's actually written, so they'll probably take that into consideration.
But wouldn't it normally be
PQB
them to?
hasn't seen this though yet.
Would be them.
Not
Wouldn't it-
yet.
Wouldn't it be them
Until
to
this
approve
Thursday.
before it came to select board though?
Yes.
We're not going to see that till this Thursday, PQB.
Well, it's supposed to go to PQB first.
I know.
Yeah.
so what's your pleasure on this, folks?
I just think PQB should approve it first before it comes to us, if that's the normal routing.
I think that too. In fact, PQB gets frustrated when we do these types of things.
I mean, it seems to me
Okay,
that,
so you want to make that into a motion, Chris?
yeah, I would just suggest that, I guess the person needs to submit this request to the PQB first and get approval before it comes back to us, and then maybe,
Or do we
I don't know how
approve this
quickly that can
contingent
happen.
on
Can it happen
PQB?
before the end of the fiscal year? I mean, are we,
Okay, so let's get a second for the discussion. You want a second for discussion?
I'll
Sal?
second it.
Okay, so Matt, you had a question.
I'm just wondering whether, I think that this is in the PQB's wheelhouse, not ours. Frankly, they know the rules, and I think that we should approve this I think that we should approve this pending PQB's decision, so that if PQB, which meets this Thursday in 2 days, so before the fiscal year, if PQB decides to approve it, then it's good, and if PQB decides to deny it, then it's denied, and
Okay.
our vote follows the vote of the PQB. So one, we don't upset them, and two, we follow the procedure.
okay.
Okay, who's on the PQB?
I am.
Okay, so if that's what we're agreeing to, we need, I'll take a vote on the motion, and,
Well, the motion was not that.
no, that's what I mean, let's take a vote on this motion since we're there, and if the motion passes, fine, if it doesn't pass, we'll take a new motion
So what's the motion right now?
to not sign it until the PQB takes a look at it.
So that means we're
So
going
we
to have to meet again?
rescind that motion.
Well,
right?
again, we can rescind it or we can vote it down.
So that means we're going to have to vote again? I mean, we're going to have to meet again before
No,
the fiscal year?
no.
If PQB meets and approves it, then we're going to have to meet again to
No,
to
no.
pay the
Why
vacation?
don't I just rescind the motion that I made so that this
Rescind the
moves more
second and
smoothly?
rescind the motion.
Rescind it.
I'll rescind the motion. yeah.
So now make your motion, Matt, that you want us to approve it pending approval from the PQB, I think is where you were going.
Yes, I would pending approve the carryover of Tom Quinlan's vacation, pending approval of PQB this coming Thursday, the 27th.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
So basically, if the PQB doesn't approve it, this dies.
We don't approve it.
Okay.
We
Any,
follow their vote.
okay, well, yeah, we're saying we approve it, but it's pending their approval.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's what you were just saying.
That
I mean,
way.
I just think we should just follow their vote, because that's what we would do anyways, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
Not
it's just a
necessarily.
little more complicated that way. Because we're approving it, but saying if PQB doesn't approve it, then we're really not approving it. We can do that. It just seems to be a little more complicated, so,
Well, then, do we need to meet, well, then, fine, before I get a second on this, let me just
Well,
ask the,
I think you had a second already. One of you folks seconded it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Francine seconded it. So let me ask a question, Ed. Does this physically have to be approved by the end of
that's my question.
June?
Yeah.
Or can we approve it at our first meeting in July if PQB approves it? Because we're in a new fiscal year then.
I would say it needs to be
With,
approved.
well, I have to think about the date timelines here. And if it was earlier, I'd say, I would have said yes, because if PPPB approves it and you don't, the person wouldn't have had the opportunity to actually try to take those extra days. But in this case, PPPB isn't going to meet till Thursday, and we're not open on Friday, so it's probably a moot point.
Can I play something for you, please?
This meeting last week, and some of the items on the agenda under new business pertain to that, so I'll wait to report more on that down there. Old business, building inspector, Tom Quinlan requests carryover 1 week vacation. We had this request at the last meeting, but there wasn't any backup to it, so we opted to have a special meeting to address this once he brought us more paperwork. And we have other items that naturally accumulated on the agenda, so I'm going to read it. Dear PPPB Finance and Select Board, I'm requesting to carry over 35 hours of vacation time to next fiscal year, 2019. For the majority of fiscal 2018, I was only paid 31 hours. In January, my paid hours were increased to 35 hours. The workload required for my position with inspections and zoning enforcement has increased considerably this year. I had to put in over 35 hours every week this year. I did not have an alternate until March this year to cover if I was away. I fully understand in the future I need to use this time. Sincerely, Tom Quinlan, Building Commissioner. That sounds like the letter I just read.
So why is he not using the time? Which he describes in the letter, but, I mean, yeah.
So, we still have a motion to approve this pending PQB. Do we want to go ahead with the motion, or do you want to rescind this motion and?
We didn't get an answer to the question, Ed. Does this need to be approved by the end of the fiscal year?
Normally, I would say yes, to give the person the opportunity to take the time if it doesn't get approved. But like I say, it's a moot point because PPB vote isn't going to vote till Thursday, so there's not going to be any time for this person to take the time anyway. So
The other side to that coin is if we decided to vote it down, he'd know tomorrow.
right.
I'm going to suggest a couple things. One is that it should have gone to PQB in the first place, so I would like to send it back to PQB. It shouldn't have come directly to us. I feel that he made a statement that he realizes in the future that this is not going to be an option, so I don't know why it keeps happening. I think people should take their vacations. I know that in Ed and Vicky's contract, it says that you can carry over. I know you're both very hardworking, but you're also leaders in this building, and I would encourage in the future that vacations be taken because you're setting an example to everybody else who's following the personnel policies of the town. So, I think the people that have contracts that allow them to do it, that I support, but I discourage it. And for people that have already said it won't happen again, I can't support it.
This is not in Tom's contract, but it is in Vicky and Ed's? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so Tom's the outlier?
We've got
He
to,
was approved last year, and all of this should have gone to PQB before us.
okay, so we got to deal with this motion. So I'm going to take a vote on it just to get it off the table.
Okay.
So the motion was to approve it and pending PQB approval on Thursday. So
But by definition of that, if PQV votes it down, then we do not approve.
Right.
by definition,
Correct.
kind of squirrely definition, yes, in my opinion, but yes. So all in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Did everybody vote? Okay, I'm going to vote with Rini on this one. So it carries 3-2. If I got that vote right? Okay, next one is vacation carryover request from Ed. Do we have that in here, Ed, or are you going to?
No, it's in here.
Too much paper tonight.
So just to reiterate, this does not pass if PQB votes this down on Thursday.
Correct.
Ed,
What's that?
this does not pass if PQB votes it down.
I object to that because according to my contract.
No, not you,
No,
we're
not
talking
you,
Tom.
not you.
I'm sorry.
Tom.
I followed your motion. It's supposed to mirror the PPB's.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, for Tom. Strenuously object.
Okay.
Although I did agree, and Vicky agreed to play along, but PPB does have both our, both of our requests.
Pull it up.
I move to approve.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this, put it in the record.
I think you're just trying to get to me there, Matt.
He came that close. So, dear Chairman Lawrence and Martin, respectfully request carryover 5 days, 40 hours vacation time from fiscal 19 to fiscal 20 per my contract. Due to a number of special projects I've been involved with this year, I was not able to use all my allotted vacation time due to the timelines involved in these projects. I request approval of the PQB and the Select Board to carry over the requested time to the next fiscal year. Even with the approval of carrying over this requested amount of vacation time, I will be forfeiting a number of hours in addition to this, which I was not able to utilize. Thank you very much in advance for your kind consideration. Edward J. Gibson, Town Administrator. So, is there a motion on this, or do you want to ask Ed any questions before we do a motion?
A motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
I'll just encourage you to try to take vacation, Ed.
Yes.
Yeah, you gotta take vacation.
And I repeat what, yes, ditto what Rini said.
Healthy.
Yes.
Okay, then I respectfully request, don't pile it on next year, please. I don't think in another year I'd ever see as many special projects, so.
I think I would just like to say that I would really like, if there is a procedure to go through PQB, I would like to see that more adhered to so that it goes to them first before coming here and not to everybody at the same.
And the last week of
we're obviously
June.
meeting different times, so fine for now, but let's see if we can't make that a little
So
bit.
that brings up a question. Do we need a procedure so that it gets to the PQB by a certain time of year and to us by a certain time of year? Just last minute, like we're saying, it's just, it almost like the last minute, we have to almost approve these.
I think that should be done by the PQB, don't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So Ed, is that something you can look into and ask the PQB if they can develop a schedule?
Well,
that
actually,
they
we
can-
have a liaison right here.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
okay, there you go. Never mind, we have that.
Yeah, and they're looking at, and now I forgot to say this, but I will send you a copy of the rules and regulations anyway. They're looking at remodifying everything, so they're looking for comments
Good.
on that. So, and currently, like I say, there is no. It says in there that they're required to go to the PPB and their appointing authority, but there is no dates in there. So that could be one of the comments to them.
Yeah.
That
That'd
makes
be one thing
sense.
to tighten up, by June 1st or whatever it may be, or something like that, so that there's more time to consider it.
And I don't know if it's more appropriate, those two policies we talked about earlier about the travel up front and taking time off to be PQB versus you doing them. I'm not sure, but I think we need
I
to.
would prefer to do them.
You would? Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So next, Police Chief Ian Illingsworth letter requesting appointment to the Public Safety Building Committee. That should be in your folders, page 124. It makes sense that he's on there, obviously, as the police chief, the police department representative for the new complex. So
I'll make a motion to appoint Ian Illingsworth to the Public Safety Committee.
okay, second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is mass lottery notification for Keno license application for Camp John Association. Do they have one already, Ed, do you know? Or is this the first?
This would be their first. And basically, the Mass Lottery sends these out, and basically the request is, okay, if the select board has any objection to this, please let us know. Otherwise, they're just going to move forward with it.
Okay. So we have it in our packet. I just want to reread it. So the objection of the city town must be as a result of an official action taken by said city or town. An official action is defined as one in which the applicant appeared or was given the opportunity. Okay, so does anybody on the board have an issue with approving the Keno license for Camp John Association? Now, I'm assuming, Ed, that the Mass Lottery Commission has regulations on times and all that for Keno?
They would.
Yeah. And they'd have to abide by those?
Correct.
Okay. So all we're doing is approving it, and Mass Lottery will take it from there and...
You're not even approving it unless you've got any objections to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any objections to that?
I don't.
No.
No? No?
Do you need a
Okay.
motion?
No? Okay. So next, Easthampton Media request to pay for a consultant to diagnose broadcast transmission issues. That's number 126.
She's been sitting here all night. She's here.
You're still waiting, huh, Jen?
Patiently waiting.
I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
And I'll read the email. Hi, Ed. I wanted to let you know the results of our signal test today. We currently have the Southampton fiber transmitter and receiver hooked up directly to each other with a short fiber cable. We're sending a camera signal through, and it works perfectly. We also tested an audio signal going through, which works as well. It's been hooked up for a few hours now, and no problems. We knew the transmitter and receiver were fine because we had sent them to the manufacturer for bench tests back in October, and they passed. All of the rest of our gear has been tested and works right up to the transmission from the basement of the town hall, the fiber. Two different charter communication technicians came out and tested the fiber and claimed that the problem was with our gear. Today's test was pivotal because a second broadcast engineering consultant that we hired came on 5/22/19 and combed through everything else in great detail to rule out problems with all of Easthampton's media hardware and cables. Is it possible to reimburse Easthampton Media for the consulting fees out of the PEG Access Fund? Please see attached invoice. There is strong evidence that the signal problem is with Charter's fiber and not with any of Easthampton Media's hardware or cables. Charter is claiming that their tests are perfect and the problem is with our gear. I'm going to default back to Charter, though they have not been very helpful. I will keep you informed. And then attached to that is the invoice from Axelrod Broadcast Solutions LLC, who was the second consultant that came in for $950.
So what does it mean to default back to Charter? Jen? Yeah.
So basically, I had to
Introduce yourself.
Jen Ramsey, Easthampton Media. So basically, I had to contact Charter again and have them send technicians back out and explain the situation that the broadcast engineer explained to us. So tomorrow morning, I will be here at 10 a.m. to do that.
Okay. So hopefully they're going to agree with you this time?
I hope so.
And what happens if they don't? Is it still going to be finger pointing? Or?
Yeah, there might. I'm going to share the very detailed report we got from that consultant with the Charter technician. And then, they'll run some tests, check out all of their fiber connections and all that. And if they claim that their fiber is working perfectly, then I'm going to have to go and try to contact someone else in Charter, someone higher up. Because there's, like I said,
Just getting a guy in a truck? I mean, is that with the like a guy that I would get at my house?
Charter Communications has a PEG access coordinator who I've been working with. His name's Andrew Shanley, and he's been pretty responsive, but he dispatches the Charter technician. So if the Charter technician runs all the tests and says there's nothing wrong with the Charter fiber, then I'm going to have to see if I can contact somebody else or figure out with Ed how to move forward.
So it wasn't possible to have your consultant and the Charter people here at the same time so that they could both see one another's tests and test results?
I have a very detailed report from the consultant that I'm going to share. I don't know if it's necessary to have him here. He was from Framingham, so it would, require him to travel quite a distance and cost us more money to have him come out at the same time.
I meant looking in hindsight to have them here, because, that's a likely outcome when you have two entities. They're just going to point to one another.
Yeah.
Likely, but...
So you said you had a detailed report. I'm just looking at the invoice, and, he did some drawings of the meeting rooms and preliminary drawings, examined the connections, and did perform basic cleaning, prepare shopping lists of components and supplies to improve auto quality. Doesn't sound real detailed.
So I have a 2-page written report from him as well that really details out what he did. I can send that to you if you'd like, with diagrams, which are really, really helpful. We didn't have diagrams before. Whoever wired the room here however many years ago didn't actually have a diagram, so we weren't sure where the connections were going without tracing wires. So he did that diagram for us, as well as a really detailed description of what he did.
So he tested everything from our fiber coming in the building, all of your equipment.
Yep.
And everything worked fine. The fiber coming in, he's saying, isn't giving a good signal?
Well, you can't test that.
Well, you can test
The signal's been intermittent, so it's been really hard to test. That final test that we did where we hooked the two transmitter and receiver up to each other without having to run 5 miles of fiber, we hooked them back up where they go, so we put the transmitter back in the basement. And today we had great video signal, but no audio. So it's been intermittent, it's really hard to diagnose, and there's been all the finger pointing. So I'm working through it, I'm trying the best I can.
I'm having the same problem at home, and I'm buying equipment that all of a sudden is not solving the problem.
Yeah.
But for what this guy did, it took him 10 hours to do all this, which doesn't sound like...
He was here for many hours that day he came, and he also hooked up, he has, special equipment to measure signal. And he hooked that up to multiple devices. He, traced cables for us. He made some really, really detailed report. So if you want, I can send that to you. It was really helpful, and it's going to be helpful tomorrow when I meet with Charter.
I think if you send it to Ed, and he can send it to us.
Sure.
My guess is, Chris, there's travel hours in there, too. He's in Framingham.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
From Framingham, that's...
But it was really hard to find someone local that does this type of work. The only person I knew of retired. And so I had reached out to other PEG access stations and asked recommendations. And this is the second time we hired someone. The first time was probably before I started. So he was highly recommended. He was fantastic to work with. He knows his stuff, and he's got over 20 years of experience. So all I'm asking is there's over $68,000 in the PEG Access Fund right now that the town holds, and it was $950.
I'll just ask you to be careful about how you, as far as I'm concerned, the PEG Access Fund is what we pay your quarterly payments out from. It's the operating fund, and that balances out, so there's no funding in that. So
I see.
this would be the PEG Access Capital Fund if the select board actually decided to pay out of anything.
Understood.
So what happens if we say we don't want to pay it? How
Well, we eat the cost. We already paid him. I'm just asking for a reimbursement if possible, since this is a special occasion where we had to.
And this money comes from a percentage that residents of Southampton pay on their cable bill. So we don't have an answer to our problem yet.
We don't.
You know?
We're a step closer, though, which is good.
Yeah, so I would love to see the more detailed report for one thing, and I'd like to finally have an answer to this problem. I mean, we've had nothing but problems with this whole setup for a very long time.
I know.
I think we should just table this and consider paying it when the problem's fixed, because that's what you would do it. That's what you do under a private enterprise. Like if you were at home, I would never pay this bill if the thing's not fixed.
Well, the issue is ECAT already paid it, so the bill is paid. He's just looking for reimbursement, but if you want to hold off, that's up to the board.
It's worth just asking, why did you pay this bill when the problem's not fixed? I would have never paid this bill in my home if this problem wasn't fixed.
Because his job was to consult and to diagnose, and he diagnosed everything he could up until charter. So now charter is coming back tomorrow to finish the diagnosing.
So
Here's the thing,
so why isn't Charter
somebody's
paying the
wrong.
bill?
So are you paying Charter's bill for the same reason? Is Charter billing us for any of this work? Okay.
I'm just saying, why don't we pass this to charter?
That would be great.
I think the issue, Matt, is what you were saying. I think if Charter was giving us this bill, she wouldn't have paid it because the problem's not diagnosed. But we were hiring a consultant to come in and give us this information, we being them. And so you got to pay the consultant because that's a separate contract.
Sure, but I'm with you so far, John. But your talk there draws a very big assumption that this guy is right and the charter is wrong.
Correct.
And at this point, I don't think we know that this guy is right and charter is wrong. These two people are pointing their fingers at each other.
What Jen is saying, she feels that this is an accurate report she got from the consultant.
Yeah.
And that she hired. So she paid them based on the information she thinks is accurate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it's whether we want to reimburse ECAT or not. or
And you're
hold
meeting with
off.
Charter tomorrow, right? So can you send us the full report?
Yep.
And then let us know the outcome of Charter, and we can pick it up at the next meeting? Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
Because I would like to see a little bit more about the report. It's just, it's hard for us because we have been, like, it's, well, let's just give you another $1,000 because we still don't have an answer. And we've been dealing with this for a long time. So
I understand.
I appreciate you waiting. I appreciate you hiring the consultant. I think that I'd be on board with this, but I'd feel better seeing the full report that you're very impressed with and after the meeting, which just happens to be tomorrow anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the consensus is table it until we get the report and Jen gets back to us with,
Yeah, maybe
With
put it on the
with
agenda for the next meeting.
solution.
okay.
Okay.
And if you can let Ed know what happens tomorrow, hopefully
I will.
Charter says it's their fault and they fix it.
Yeah, hopefully. If not, we'll figure it out from there.
Whoever makes that decision, I want their name.
Then we'll have you on the early part of the agenda, the next meeting, how's that?
Okay, great.
And before you
And Jen, one little reminder, and I don't really mind because we got $17,000 roughly still sitting in our account, but your treasurer still hasn't billed us for that fourth quarter payment, or fourth quarter invoice, or at least I haven't received it.
I definitely sent that to you, so I'll be the one sending them. I actually did send that to you. I'll just forward it to you just so you have it again. No problem.
So could you just update us, Ed? So you said that you mentioned a capital account, plus you also mentioned the account that she referenced as far as taking it out of. So there's one account that has to do with 1% of the bills from, right?
There's one account that we actually budget, but we have to now estimate what our quarterly payments from Charter are going to be, and that is what is passed through on a quarterly basis to ECAT for the operating expenses. There is another account which is just for the capital, I will call items, or the equipment items that we get, and I believe it's one payment each time we sign a contract, but I'd have to look back at the Charter contract. That's got roughly $68,000 sitting in it right now, and that is the account actually that we would be utilizing to upgrade the equipment in this room and also put the equipment in the Norris Library to televise the meetings there.
And both funds come from payments that people that use Charter pay.
Absolutely accurate.
Okay, so I guess that's where we are.
Table until next
Good
time.
luck tomorrow.
Thank you, appreciate it.
If people don't mind, I'm going to skip over the town administrator evaluation. Getting late, we got some stuff we need to do. PCFs, there were 4 of them approved last night by the Finance Committee. Carol Gillette, Cynthia Lucier, Barbara Thompson, Judith Poulin. These were approvals for their pay raise being retroactive back to January 1. They weren't approved retroactive. Is that correct, Ed?
That's correct. They had discussed it, and they had basically agreed to it, but there was never a notation put on the PCFs that they would be retroactive to January 1, 2019. So rather than make up a whole new set of PCFs, we just thought it would be easier just to make that notation on them, send them back through, and have them initialed for the retroactivity.
It was, if you remember right, it was going from $11 to the $12 minimum wage.
Right.
And it's just making it retroactive for that. And they were all signed off on last night. So I was there, so I know they were all signed off on. So we need a motion to accept these 4 PCFs.
I move to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
Looks like they were signed off by PQB also.
Yep.
I'll second it, so if you have.
Oh, we got a first and second.
You already have a second, okay.
Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, can you pass over? So while I'm doing this, would you mind, Francine, reading the warrants?
Okay, warrants. P 19-48 for $271,383. PD 19-48 for $47,206.81. PD 19-48A for $186,239.71. PD 19-48A1/S for $555. PD 19-48S/A1 for $120.38. P 19-48A2 for $509.44, and PD 19-48A2 for $109.30.
Okay, thanks. The long list of warrants is the chair's favorite thing. Give some time for breathing.
Okay.
Okay, other document, oh, let me go back up, never mind. Licenses, permits. Barbara Ripa, one-day beer and wine, Conant Park, 7/27/19, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And Emily Powers, one-day beer and wine, 158 Glendale Road, 7/13/19, 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. after the bike race. Ed, all those signed, is a check-in and whole checklist done?
Receive the checks, everything is in order for these.
Okay.
Move to approve them both.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Who was the motion and second, please?
I move.
Matt?
Yeah,
And me.
Seconded.
thank you.
Is there anything on the pending items that anybody wants to bring up now?
Yep.
Good, thank you. So, Calendar announcements. We know July 9th, July 15th for a special meeting with FinCom, and July 23rd. And just as a reminder, the July 15th is at 5:30 upstairs. Open time for the public. There's nobody here, so. Executive sessions, we're actually only going to have the first one. The second two, we're not going to need right now.
Approve any minutes?
Nope, there's no minutes to approve, those are scratched.
All right, sorry.
That's okay.
All right.
I didn't bring it up. So we're going into executive session, and we won't return to open session. It's under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. For police officers, New England Benevolent Police Association. Can I have a motion to go in executive session?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Roden, aye.
Roland, aye.
Martin, aye.
Tishman, aye.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session after a 5-minute recess. Thank you.